It's time for the part of Summoning Insight where Thorin and I argue amongst each other. Actually, we mostly just agree on shit and rant. And then you say, old man yells at cloud. We're to do this part now. It'll come up first on the VOD, but it'll come up.
Anyway, there's an obvious question. If you don't like old men shouting at clouds, what sort of fucking loser are you? That's what you're watching right now. I wasn't doing that when I was young. There's no Zoomers out there that are really entertaining and have all the great analytical knowledge. And guess, there aren't any. Then shut the fuck up and sit back then. Or you Zoomer just says nonsense, what somebody doesn't know anything about. Oh, well, listen, mate, that's not even fucking rare. 10 a penny.
Or we have timestamps, so just click on the part that isn't this. We did have some interesting stuff that I wanted to talk about this week. It's another time is a flat circle moment where I don't understand why these arguments come up time and time again, Thorin. But we had the question of why does 100 Thieves get to play their academy team in the last game of the season? Isn't that disrespectful to the tournament? This is affecting our playoff standings. Wah, 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 wah. So what's your take?
I mean, basically, my take is a very consistent one because I've obviously spent a lot of my career thinking about formats and different tournaments and trying to figure out here's what I do, as I always say, I try to think what the format selects for. Like, what is it essentially saying? I want you to do this. This is how I want the tournament to be set up. So I always point out, for example, the reason I hate the World's Group format is it literally treats you as if the second best LPL team is as good as whoever, was from fucking Vietnam. For real, that's what the system tells you. It tells you I'm going to treat number 2 LPL the same as the best from whoever, fucking GAM, if they're the team that qualifies. So similarly, right, what you're talking about with this tournament, Monty, here is a league system, which is effectively a round-robin system, right? Every round-robin system ever held will run into these problems, especially the more games you have in it. So people know from Worlds, which is a round-robin, those group stages, when do you ever get a Worlds that has 0 tiebreakers? It might have happened once, I don't know, but almost every year there's tiebreakers, right? It's always tiebreakers. If it's not, by the way, even if just for first place, sometimes not even to get out of the group, you never know, right? There's always because that's what happens with that format. So the flaw of having a round-robin format is you will always have games in a round-robin format that do not matter to one or sometimes even both of the teams. And the problem when you get that game is the team then, since by definition it does not matter to them, have the choice to not try their hardest to win the game. And unfortunately, that is a literal feature. It's not a bug. It is a feature of this system. Now, what's funny is that allows some people to do what TSM did, and you can not care about the game, but you can do something fun with it. Like you can have a weird role swap, and you can do whatever you want with the lineups. Or you could do what 100 Thieves has done, which is more like the sporting approach, where in sports, the NBA is obviously massive for this. You do the load management, where you don't want a guy getting burned out or injured in this scenario. So you just let him have the last game off, because it doesn't matter. You're in the playoffs. You've already got your seed locked in. So basically, the problem is this, Monty. If I ask myself qualitatively as a viewer of the product, do I like teams fielding their academy squad or role swapping? No, it's terrible. Like, I actually did a watch party during that particular EG versus 100 Thieves match. And I obviously arranged the watch party at the beginning of the week when I thought that would be an amazing game right after C9TL. It was a terrible game. It was fucking garbage. So I hate that part. But as I say, if you allow this system, there's not really any way around it. There's no real rule you can make that changes this format to stop this. And so this isn't even the worst example of it. You can have games where I intentionally put in bad players and I even tell the players try to accidentally not win because it's better for XYZ reasons if we lose the game. So it can get even worse. I'm just not a fan of round robin in general. So I think, as you say, I think people are lost in the woods if they think it's specifically about 100 Thieves on that one. It's more like what the format sort of implies you should do, because if you go the other way and try and argue why should you play all the players, look, I could make like a sort of philosophical argument that, you know, you should try your hardest and why not go for greatness and win as many games. I could go with some angle like that, but it's not really that great a sell, is it, to people who on the practical level are just thinking, I don't want to get stuff away for next week, I don't want to play next week, I want to give an academy player a chance. So I don't really find it that big an outrage. I just didn't enjoy the game myself.
No, and also, like you said, the part of when you design formats is that you want to minimize the number of meaningless games. And unfortunately, in long form league formats where you're doing 5 round robins, it's very, very difficult to do that. And to describe the situation that happened, guys, because had 100 Thieves won that game, they would have had the same record as TSM, but because there's 5 round robins, the head-to-head tiebreaker, you don't need to play a tiebreaker because the head-to-head is always going to tiebreak for you. And what happened was 100 Thieves was 2-3 on the season against TSM. So even if they had won, had the identical record, they would have lost due to the head-to-head tiebreaker, right? So that's the issue. And you created this problem. And the thing is, there are a lot of arguments, people saying, we'll just destroy them really quickly. Some people are saying, well, there's no injuries in esports, so therefore you should have to field your roster. The reason why the NFL or the NBA or sports allow the second stringers to come in is because of injury. That is true, but also there are other inherent advantages, such as what 100 Thieves was very transparent about saying. Papa Smithy said this. Here you go. We want to play our academy players in this because we want more time to prepare for playoffs. Now, objectively, given 100 Thieves' current condition, you would say, wow, it's great that they have the luxury of having an extra day because they haven't looked as strong at the end of the split as they did at the start of the split. So this is a real advantage that they have earned and won by playing super well beforehand. When you have 45 games in the regular season, Cloud9 had 44 different times where they could have affected the outcome and not been in this situation, right? 44 different times to take the 3rd seed, to have the easier time against Dignitas, to win a couple more games and be in top 2 and get the bye, right? You could look at, you look at Cloud9, they could have beaten EG this same week. If they had won the game against EG, then they wouldn't have been in this position. So to say that, 100 Thieves is somehow, competitively dishonest, they don't have competitive integrity by doing this, is fucking ridiculous. They earned this through the last 6 months of competition. Other teams didn't earn it. And why do they owe Cloud9 or anyone else anything? They don't owe Cloud9 the opportunity to get into the 3rd seed. And it's not like they forfeited the match. They had a chance to win that match. In fact, a lot of the players on their academy are very hyped up players. Luger had a good individual performance in that game. You look at players like Kenby and Tenacity that are getting a lot of buzz right now as probable, I would say, future LCS players. So it also increases their value now that they have an LCS game under their belt, that they can have that experience that 100 Thieves can point to and say, hey, if we want to sell this player, we have that option in the future. So I don't know. It just seems completely absurd to me on its face that anybody could possibly complain about this, and especially those teams that were fucking around with their rosters.
It's the most egregious one in there.
Nobody forced you to put King in Cloud9. Nobody made you do that. Team Liquid, hey, you didn't have to bench Alfari. That was your choice. And now you're like, oh, I guess those games mattered after all. It's like, no shit.
The Team Liquid one is the worst one, because if people don't know, it was Santorin himself who openly complained about exactly this issue, and specifically with the 100 Thieves Cloud9 one, right? And the one that part I have is this, as you just said there, Monty. That's fucking rich, Santorin. First of all, you haven't even been playing, mates. I don't know why you're talking about this split, so forget about that. And then secondly, your team benched the best player in the entire LCS for the majority of the split. That's fucking rich that you're talking about teams not fielding their best roster to win the game. By definition, your team didn't do that. And I don't want to hear any nonsense about, like, secretly Jenkins. He wasn't. That was all fucking nonsense and people still don't get it. So listen, it's not the end of the world. And I will acknowledge there's obviously a difference between putting your entire academy squad and one player different. But my point is that I guarantee Team Liquid lost a bunch of games because they didn't have Alfari, or Cloud9 had Sven out of the game, etc. And the point is, we're talking now about the fine margins of what one game does at the end of the split. Because there's another thing people love to do in esports, Monty. You'll have seen this yourself. Unfortunately, it manifests the most in open circuit tournaments, because people are playing so many tournaments they don't have time to look into the rules. People only go mental and lose their mind about rule formats when it's the last game and the last game decides everything. So they do it at Worlds when it's a tiebreaker, or like that scenario in the IM years ago where like Gambit had to win like the game faster than someone else won a game. They only go mental at the end because they never looked into the rule format, and they only realised at the end, oh, this could actually just hurt me specifically. So this is outrageous. Like, what a mad ass you are. Like, you would just cool with it. If you benefited, you'd have been cool with it, would you? Like, what the fuck's that?
It's just so egregious, because here's an analogy for you. It's like Cloud9 and Team Liquid intentionally lit their house on fire, and then it burned to the ground, and then their neighbor is across the street just living his life, and they're like, you're not helping me rebuild. You're a bad person. It's like, no, you fucking did that to yourselves Intentionally, very deliberately, you made these decisions. And it's not their fault or their responsibility that you were an idiot. So I'm baffled by this entire. I mean, it wasn't a big outrage. Like, I'm not gonna, it seems like most people had a very reasonable take on this. Yeah, it seemed most people had a very reasonable take. So it wasn't like there was a large section of the community that I think was really wrong. But I just think it's egregious coming from some of these orgs. That you were given so many opportunities, so many, way more. In fact, you were giving more opportunities to dig yourself out of this hole. There was only one game separating you. It's like, a coin flip goes one way in one of these games, and all of a sudden you're benefiting from it instead of on the short end of the stick. It's a very small margin. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty egregious overall. Now, the format thing that I didn't think was egregious, which I talked about earlier, was Parth saying that as TSM, getting the first seed doesn't convey a lot of benefits. Now, this is partially disingenuous because the thing about the LCS formats is if you're in the top 2 seed, you get a bye, and you only have to win one best of 5 to qualify for Worlds, which is objectively making it a lot easier, right? A lot easier in the playoff bracket. But what he said is that, now this is also a far-fetched situation, but he said basically that TSM, because there's no reseeding in LCS, right? The LEC brackets actually reward higher seeding via placement into the losers bracket, and the first place team gets to select their opponent, which we will be very interested to talk to Larsson about very shortly. But when you look at TSM, let's say Dignitas, very unlikely scenario, because I think most people would peg EG as winning the split. Dignitas somehow upsets EG. Well, TSM doesn't get to play Dignitas. They get to play the winner of C9 TL. 100 Thieves gets to play Dignitas, which is kind of lame. I will give that one. I think that reseeding is even traditional sports like the NFL has put reseeding into effect recently in their playoff formats. And I think that there should be stronger incentives, especially when you just lengthened the regular season to include more games, which means that you are putting more emphasis on the regular season by playing more games, which means that the team in first place should have a higher reward, and that higher reward should include reseeding.
Yeah, I think it's a totally fair point. I agree. Yeah, it's totally fair. By the way, so just as a random aside, normally I would send you this privately, but actually I thought, you know what, fans of this show, we created a lot of the best memes in the community, like we did. Like I was even told something mad last night during a watch party, Monty, that apparently people in Korea, the netizens there, eventually did start using, apparently some like Western fan of someone in Insight translated the meme that we had about Looper, about how like Matt was like mind controlling him, and supposedly they were even doing that in like the Korean scene for years after, which is pretty sick by the way. But anyway, what I was going to mention was this, is if people after this show ends want to watch something, by the way, technically you can always watch the VOD. It's always on the Twitch channel, actually, if you don't know. Yep. It's not like my content where I don't stream it anyway, but like we take the shit down. Basically, if you want some straight fire hilarious content, right? Obviously at the moment everyone loves to watch fucking the double lift Meteos sneaky brain trust, right? And I intentionally use the word brain trust for this tale because basically I'll link it after this show. I'll put it on Twitter so everyone can go watch it. This is one of the funniest videos, Monty. I don't even think you can get it's like when people have those videos that like if you laugh you lose or whatever. Like you won't even get 5 minutes into this video. It's a whole VOD. Like you don't need to watch more than about 10 minutes, but it starts right. And Doublelift, Sneaky, and Meteos are all discussing. Doublelift brings up the very famous like infinite monkeys, infinite typewriter scenario. This is so funny. And mate, none of them get it. None of them. But here's the thing: they're on different levels. Like Doublelift almost gets it, but he just trusts someone smarter came up with it and he can't explain it properly. Meteos is in the middle where like he doesn't really get it, but he can't quite. And then Sneaky doesn't get it at all. And literally, Monty, I'm talking 5 or 10 minutes into an explanation, is still saying stuff like, yeah, but there's no way they type whole words in a row. Like, they've tried over and over again to explain like what the infinity part means. But like, mate, if you just like league content in general, this is going to be some of the best 10 minutes you'll ever invest in. I'll put the VOD on Twitter in a minute. Like, it's so funny. It will heal your soul. In the dark times that we have, this will heal your soul. This can bring the community together again.
You know what I wonder? When I heard that Doublelift had just discovered the infinite monkey theorem, which is like, I mean...
It's one of the most famous of all time. I know it's super old as well.
I just don't even know how to react to not knowing what that is. at a fundamental level. And sometimes, Thorin, I wonder if our content is actually too complicated because we tend to just like throw out references like that and just assume people know it. Whereas maybe we would be more popular if we just assumed people were idiots and didn't know that and then pretended. I'm not saying they pretended, but we would have to pretend. Yes. We would have to pretend not to know that ourselves and then get confused by it to make people feel smarter themselves who are watching it. So I feel like sometimes we miss the mass appeal because we just take this kind of knowledge and these references for granted.
Basically, all I'm saying, like, I love all the people on this broadcast, but I just enjoyed it like an episode of The Office or something. I just went, let's just watch this fucking cringe. Fucking Jesus, oh God. Oh, please stop. Make it stop. But I couldn't press the button to stop, and I had to keep watching it. It's too good. It's too good.
It reminds me of some of those clips from like XQC where he doesn't understand condensation.
Oh yeah, the one I sent you, that was amazing, wasn't it? I know. But he was going, when you have a cup, like, what's all that shit on the outside? Like, he's really thinking that like the liquid's gotten out of the cup. So like, the whole thing's like, the other one, there was another similar one, probably my favorite ever.
He doesn't understand midnight.
Was when someone asked him what noon is, and he goes, well, you've got midday, you've got midnight, and you've got noon. And he's already designed, by the way, a calendar that's about like 18 hours long or something. Like, get me out again, please. Is this individual really a millionaire? Is he really a millionaire? Our culture's done. Just shut it down. It's over. It's all done. Somehow the fact that they're actually like genuine, they're not. Here's the problem, Monty. If they actually were acting and it was like a comedy, it wouldn't be as funny. Actually, it's the fact that they're so earnest in definitely not knowing what the fuck they're talking about. Actually makes it amazing content. It's bad entertaining. I can't lie.
And this, kids, is why you should go to college instead of being a pro gamer. That would be my advice to all of you. Also, why liberal arts are important. So even if you're going to college and you're studying engineering, maybe take a few liberal arts classes so at least you have the ability to have baseline discussions about culturally relevant topics and historically relevant topics as well. Something that probably, a little bit lacking in the education. I've seen a lot of these same clips on like Inside the NBA too, where they just don't understand.
Oh no, they've got some mad ones as well, of course. Yeah,
because some of the stuff that Shaq says.
Can I tell you one that's really mad, by the way? Right, even though I am personally also someone who's sort of on the side of like, I think stats usage in sports has gone way too far. Like they really think the stats give you the answer as opposed to the other way around. That the stat just sort of like is an interesting question that you then answer with your expert opinion. Right. The maddest thing a lot of people won't know because they're not old school enough to know this is like Charles Barkley is mega against using like advanced analytics. He thinks you should just use the eye test as an expert. What a lot of people don't know is this. Charles Barkley, I don't think even he knows this, is actually one of the players that if you use the advanced metrics comes out like the best of almost any other player in history. Like he has like some of the most insane like min-max stats of all. So the joke is if he actually thought it through, like it would actually make him look way better. But he doesn't know that. That's the joke of it. So he always goes against it, Monty, which is basically like if fucking Tom Brady was just out there going, I think defense is mad overrated. Just give me the ball and put fucking anyone on the defense and we win anyway. It's like, no, that's the opposite of your career. You've got it completely wrong, Tom. Like you go the other way on that one. Like that's not going to help. So I don't know. It's just funny when people don't see their own blind spot, as it were. I always appreciate it.
Too funny. So before we get into the Rogue, any other topics on your mind this week, Thorin? Before we talk to Larsson about any of the LEC playoffs, we're not into LPL playoffs yet. I will say we'll probably do an episode on that once those actually start. And we get closer to Worlds. Obviously, a lot to unpack in LPL and LCK. The regions that we'll probably be doing, well, I don't know about LCK. They look really shaky right now, but LPL at least will almost certainly win Worlds this year. So, but any other topics that have been on your mind?
I mean, I'll tell you what, it's actually the top thread on Reddit now, but it's basically something that a lot of people have realized this week, and it's pretty depressing, is if you went to, I think it was last year when they didn't qualify for Worlds, Rookie said some comment last year that was like, next year's probably my last year. And I think he even implied in some interview, if he didn't qualify for Worlds, basically he would retire at the end of this year. And so the implication is, because IG's absolutely shit the bed and they haven't even made the playoffs if people don't know, basically the Rookie and TheShy might, no joke, they might have 2 games left and they might be done with their careers, mate. That is brutal if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just
into a career,
I mean, TheShy was a player who I think peaked very hard at a very specific time and really has had trouble maintaining that consistency, especially in the last couple of years. But for Rookie, I mean, this is a player that is definitely, and if you guys can go watch this, where we talk about Rookie's career, when Dom was on the show and we talked about the best players of all time, Rookie is definitely in the conversation for best mid laner. And the competition is Faker.
Everyone, yeah.
Yeah, maybe best player, period. And so what's unfortunate is that because of IG's inconsistency, even though Rookie himself has been ridiculously consistent over his entire career, going from his time in Korea when he was on KT and then moving through his many years now on IG. But the problem is like the rest of the team has been so up and down that he doesn't have, as much as I don't like using titles or like world's appearances as a way to discuss the best players, and he is himself a world champion, he just can't hold a candle to Faker's career.
Of course.
In terms of accomplishments. So I think it's really rough, even though if you were to ask right now, who is the better player between Rookie and Faker, I think you'd be crazy not to say Rookie. And that's probably been true for the last 2-3 years.
Sure. I mean, he hasn't been very good this year, but then again, whatever. It's the end of his fucking career, isn't it?
I mean, Faker hasn't been amazing either. So.
True. True. That's why that one's sad though, because unfortunately, like one of the tough things, I'll probably do some content on this soon actually, because I always say in esports, the number of years you play, it's not just like literally your career is shorter. It's that there's almost like a time dilation element that doesn't make sense in esports, where everyone knows, like, look at 100 Thieves, you can be the best in a region, and a month later you could be like the 4th best. Like the drop is too crazy. You don't get the proper run you do in sports. Like you're on top for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years in a row. So like not only has Rookie had an unbelievable amount of years, he was amazing, but the window to actually win championships obviously only comes when the teammates are there. And unfortunately in his teams, realistically, he never had the teammates to win what Faker did. So unfortunately to me, it just feels sad because like we'll never know if he would have done it. Like that's the thing Faker will always have over him. But he's someone would have been interested to put him in that mix, Like basically whenever it's a team game, I know it kind of takes out some of the sexiness of all the transfers, but I just kind of want every great player to get the right teammates and just have his chance, because the window for someone like Rookie, it has closed, obviously. Like the IG didn't replace the players that left. They like they messed around with the bot lane constantly. They basically just brought Ning back. Like they didn't make any of the moves you needed to make. So unfortunately, like I always wondered, because I knew Faker was falling off the last few years, maybe this is where Rookie catches up in titles, like maybe suddenly he wins 2 more worlds, gets an MSI. Like now you're having an interesting resume conversation even,
The crazy thing too is like I just don't understand why Rookie never left IG. I'm sure some of it is money reasons, but surely like he is totally fluent in Chinese at this point in time, and he has been for years. So communication isn't an issue for him. He has been for a number of years an elite level player. So what's confusing to me is like if you are RNG, he is just a straight upgrade. And mid lane, you could knock out your weakest position and upgrade immediately. And this guy just sticks around on IG forever. And maybe he has loyalty to the org, but it certainly hasn't done his overall career many favors, when I think he could demand much better teammates or be in a position to be on a super team in many other instances, and just it hasn't been there for him. So for me, I'm a bit surprised that maybe, after they win Worlds, you think, okay, we've got a good roster, I want to run it back. But as soon as TheShy just starts being super inconsistent, a year later, I'm out, man. Like, I'm looking for a team to build around me to make sure I have the right teammates. There are plenty of opportunities in LPL for him to have done that, and it confuses me why he did not.
That's why I always have found it depressing, though, the different mentality that they have over in Korea and China in general. Like, their idea of loyalty is like almost like the dictionary definition. They really believe, like, right, I'm with this group of people, I have to be loyal to them. And so, famously, especially if you have success, actually, sometimes the implication from the org even is like, we made you, we gave you this platform, so of course you're going to ride with us in the bad times. They can't sort of be like you're saying here. Like, if you're like Doublelift or someone, you could just fucking leave the next year and go to a team. Of course, like, it's very mercenary in the West. But sadly, I would imagine he probably feels some like ridiculous loyalty to the IG owners that paid him all these millions and all the years he's been there. Like, I was even telling people on this watch party thing I did yesterday, Monty, some fan asked me like what I think about this news that like Scores finished his military service, so maybe he comes back. And I said, you have to realize though, if you know the Korean scene, there's a depressing world where he comes back and just goes straight to KT Rolster, the worst team in the league. Like, you don't know what these guys, what their version of loyalty is like. Like, again, remember he plays his whole career in that team. He might in his brain think like, it would be disloyal to come back and go to another team. Like, yeah, they have a different way of seeing the world, quite frankly, than the rest of us.
I think it's also as that note, it's very unlikely that Score comes back as a player. It's much more likely that Score comes back as a coach, and probably for KT, like you're saying, for loyalty reasons. I mean, the upside to this, by the way, guys, that we're not talking about is KT is an org that has had money. They put together super teams at times in the past. They haven't been unwilling to spend. KT hasn't. I think what's been smart about KT is that they don't spend big money when they don't have all the pieces in place. Like, they're one of those orgs that can go out and spend if they can, like, knock down the dominoes, right? And they can say, okay, we've got these key pieces. We're going to get all these other players to join us for this year. And we're going to spend money this year because we can do it. They don't spend money for no reason. If they can't line up the right pieces, yes, they do put together kind of crappy rosters, but that's the smart way to play League of Legends as a GM is like, you don't CLG it where you spend a bunch of money just to have mediocre players where your upside is certainly better than they showed this year. And they should have been a better team, but realistically, that roster, even at their best, was not going to be competing for a world slot in the region, right? There's no point in spending money like that, in my opinion. So KT, they haven't been spending a lot of money or making a splash, but if they could employ Score, and the reverse of this is, well, Score has been very loyal to KT in the same way, like Rookie, he could have gone many other places. They will also reciprocate that loyalty and probably give him a coach, like a cushy coaching job if he wants to come back, because they also probably recognize that his experience is kind of invaluable and that he will be an attraction to draw good players in, or at least up and coming rookies that he can train. But I think it's very unlikely that he goes back into a playing role. I think it's much more likely that KT like folds him into coaching or management at this point in time, because that is kind of how things have gone in Korea. Not impossible,
also just
obviously.
a sad reality that, like, realistically, I don't care who you are, even if it was fake, I'm not joking, the odds that they ever come back from the military service, even like it's 70% of what they were, it's very low, very, very low. Because realistically, you straight up don't play for a year. Like when Monty's told that story previously of when they made like the Air Force Ace team so that Boxer could play, you have to understand that team used to lose almost every game because they were all the fucking military. They didn't have time to play 12 hours a day. So the joke was they were still playing the same matches, but they didn't have the practice time. So, and they're all washed up fucking boomers. So yeah, put it this way, the problem is, even if Score came back, like, he wouldn't be the Score that you want him to be. If he comes back, right, you don't want him to come back and be like the 7th best jungler. You want him to come back and be the king and fucking win all the championships he didn't win, don't you? So realistically, it won't even be that satisfying if he comes back as a player. It's probably better if he comes back as a coach. He could maybe actually confer like some sick knowledge to people.
It's also different than in other games. Coming back 2 years later in League of Legends, after there have been so many changes with the game, it is extremely difficult. It's a very different game at that point.
Yeah,
it's a very different game. It's not like Counter-Strike, where if I take a year off, I can come back and Dust 2 is still there and my knowledge is still somewhat applicable. It's even harder, guys, as a jungler, because jungle is the position that constantly changes in League of Legends. It's the hardest position to have any kind of long-term career in, because of the number of different champions that rotate through the pool, because of the way the jungle changes. It's Riot's fucking favorite thing to change in the universe. So you can't have a stable career as a jungler. It's a miracle Score lasted as long as he did while playing the entire time. Coming back as a new jungler again is going to be, very impressive if he could do it, but I also just don't think worth it. Like, if you are Score, why do you want that stress when you can just accept a cushy coaching job instead? Like, it doesn't even make sense from his perspective, unless he has some sort of burning desire to continue to compete. But what does he have to prove? He finally won his LCK championship. The only thing that could possibly motivate him is that he's going to be jungler on a team that has a legit shot at winning worlds, and I just don't think that's realistic. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, personally. Welcome to another episode of Summoning Insight here on the Insight on Esports channel. There is no introduction for this episode. Actually, there will be. It will be edited first, but basically Crumbz had something to do at 12, so we couldn't delay his appearance any further. We will have a little chat with me and Thorin, probably about some format stuff, I would guess, given the playoffs are coming up after Crumbz is on, and before we get Larsson on the show. You'll be seeing that first if you're watching the VOD, as a matter of fact. But for those of you watching live, you will get to enjoy the dulcet tones of Prophet Crumbz to kick off Summoning Insight today. Are you excited about the LCS Playoffs, Crumbz? Who's the team to watch? Who's winning?
EG.
Right now?
It's got to be EG. EG
Okay.
has to be the team to watch. And maybe Cloud9. Maybe Cloud9. It's looking pretty good, but TSM has been making a late late regular season run, which is slightly exciting, but the way that they have gotten a lot of the wins that got them to that position weren't particularly thrilling throughout the whole season. So they finished strong and they really banked on their early record. But I still don't think that you could consider them the top contender because the quality of wins that they have got is just not as good as EG's.
Yeah,
Here's
but see,
the
here's the
problem,
thing.
right? It's even though I do think there is a problem with the quality of the league, and look, there's definitely like issues with who the number one team is. Like, it's not looking good for international play. If you isolate only to LCS, dude, this is the most wide open the title has been maybe ever in the history of the league. Like, it's not a joke. You could legitimately make the case for like 4 teams. Let me think. I think maybe 5
you can make
teams
5.
even.
You can make 5. Yeah.
You could legit make the 5-team case, I'm pretty sure, because like as you say, like TSM in theory finished the split in first place. But I mean, put it this way, here's the angle on TSM. The obvious knock on them is they don't have an MVP candidate. Like, they don't really have like one player.
No, there is. It's Spica. Without Spica, this team does not finish top 5.
I mean, like a real
close.
MVP. Here's the
Yeah,
thing
come
that
on.
comes: if you finish 5th in MVP voting, you weren't really an MVP candidate. You know what I mean? You have to be like top 3. Like, you could really win it. So the thing with their team is like, you know, they're not really like no one's ultimate favorite. Cloud9 obviously has like some good players, but they've had some mad ropey games the last few weeks. 100 Thieves basically, even before they put in the academy roster, started just losing games out of nowhere. EG's had this mad run to come up towards the end of the split, but who the fuck knows what they would do with the rest of the year? So that's on the. And then Team Liquid still hasn't gotten it together whatsoever. So quite frankly, this is actually a super interesting playoffs to me. Unlike normally when I just complain. I'm not thinking that with a team that wins is going to be amazing internationally, but if just domestically, I actually think it might be the best LCS playoffs ever.
Oddly enough, I also think that the 8th place team, Golden Guardians, could actually be a team to cause an upset, despite them being qualifying with a negative win rate. We're taking a lot of games off top teams, and it's going to be C9 TL who they have to face, the loser of that. So there's a good chance that, say, TL loses to Cloud9, still not informed. Now they drop down to Golden Guardians, and they just get knocked out before even advancing a single round. So I think that that's an actual possibility since Cloud9 looked a bit better, and they kind of raffle stomped them just yesterday against TL.
Yeah. I mean, it is best of ones, and like it's obviously going to help a lot that Team Liquid has another week to prepare with Santorin, and I think they've looked a lot better since Santorin came back. But as for Golden Guardians, I think it's worth pointing out that both Golden Guardians and 100 Thieves in the 3rd round robin both went 4 and 5. So like if you're actually looking at the upgrades that Golden Guardians made, it has been, I would say, shockingly effective for them. And I agree that there is an outside shot that they could upset somebody, especially because 100 Thieves didn't have so hot of a performance in the last few weeks of competition. And, Cloud9 has been kind of slowly increasing in power over this split, but they're certainly not the dominant force that was expected to win in the spring split. TSM, as you note, Crumbz, this is part of it is that people always will just call us TSM haters on this show, even though literally every expert says that this team just doesn't stack up pound for pound in terms of individual ability, and that there are real concerns with them going into the playoffs in a best of 5 scenario. But it doesn't feel like, even though they end the split in first place, and they've had, I think, a pretty good summer split overall, it doesn't really track, and nobody really believes that they're going to come out on top at the end of.
Here's the problem, Monty. I've thought about this a lot, because you know this. Like, one of the things I like to do in general is whenever I look at a situation, I try to also actually look at it like anthropologically. Like, imagine I'm fucking David Attenborough, like, and here we see the fucking inbred incel who puts on his black and white jersey. He goes to his mom, tells her to get the tendies ready. For, like, I like to, like, imagine I'm actually like observing from the outside and trying to see what mechanisms are going on. So here's the problem, right? As you say, Monty, realistically, for TSM fans to still think it's haterism to say their team isn't really good, they would have to, as you say, they'd have to be like a way to falsify what they're saying, right? There'd have to be a way their case could be proven false. But as you point out, where is the expert? Where is the content, by the way, that says TSM's really good and they're actually far and away the best team and they're going to win?
Show me the person who says going to win and they're going to win this split.
No one's even doing it, by the way, on the fucking broadcast. And by the way, the broadcast loved some fucking TSM narratives a few years back. Like, they used to push that angle that, they would come semis at Worlds or whatever. So the problem with this is, right, I've figured it out, Monty. I know why the TSM fans are trapped, because they believe, Monty, that the whole world, everyone who knows about them and TSM, it's a giant conspiracy to fuck them. Now, you have to understand that's true. Everyone hates TSM fans, but they hate TSM fans because they're TSM fans. It's not actually because of anything else. So they're technically right. It's just the starting point of the conspiracy is what we disagree upon.
Wait,
Because
so you're telling me
everyone hates TSM fans?
if there's someone that is a TSM fan that is hated for being a TSM fan, could stop being a TSM fan and they would no longer be hated?
All I'm going to say is this.
Or is there a scar, like has the organism being scarred by the TSM fandom and now it's something that you just can't shake off?
Listen, you can be rehabilitated, not least because if you've ever seen like this show, loads of people who actually started out, they always say like when they were a beginner and they weren't in the industry, like, oh, I was a stupid TSM fan. That's usually what they say for their first year. So I consider it like a phase, you know. It's like when someone's 14 and they say they're like a communist. It's like, I don't really know you probably read Marx or know anything about like left-wing politics. But, you know, it's just some shit you go, you're trying to find out who you are. You're testing your identity out. So you can come back. The key thing is, Crumbz, it's like any scenario. What did you do when you were a TSM fan? If you just posted some stupid shit like, I think Bjergsen's better than Jensen, you can live, you know, that's fine. I wouldn't have corporal punishment for that or anything. But if you've gone like if you've harassed me and Monty, then no, your soul will burn in the fire for alternatives. There's nothing you can ever do to actually overcome. There's no amount of goodwill in the community. Yeah, you're just done. Just forget about it. So
it's even TSM players have become deprogrammed over time. We heard Amazing, you know, on this show the other day saying that he couldn't believe it was actually on Summoning Insight, you know? So it's I
actually think that's one thing I will say about the current lineup of TSM. The current lineup of players is actually cool. Like, have any of them been cool? I don't think any of them have actually bought into that whole nonsense. Like, put it this way, people like Power of Evil hasn't changed anything at all.
I love Power of Evil.
Pretty chill. Yeah. So as far as I know, there's not actually anyone in the current lineup. This is what's different from the past years who actually buys into that whole narrative from years ago. That was basically only Bjergsen was left at that point in time. That was just from years ago, wasn't it?
And also Bjergsen, I think, was the one who didn't care. But anyway, yes.
PoE got really helped out by, I think it was 11-14 patches where they buffed the Lost Chapter, and then suddenly it's like, oh, great, I can play Control Mages every time. I don't have to play Lee Sin. So I think that's what they doubled down on their strength that allowed them to make a later run that looked good towards the end of the second half of summer, because a lot of teams are still experimenting. None of them were really sure of their style. Even Cloud9 was talking about it. 100 Thieves looked good early because they had a good meta read. Now they still kind of lost. So TSM simply just said, all right, we tried for a whole year to play bruisers in the mid lane. We tried to play different styles. It didn't work out. It's time to fall back on our best strategy. Control mage in mid lane. Go for that. And so as they solidify their strategy that is always going to be their best move, they look so much better while other teams are still slowly experimenting. But come playoffs, a slight different meta read is still going to catch them off guard, because you know they're not going to play beyond the control mages, since it's going to be by far and away their best strategy. It's going to weaken Spica because he has to now play AD junglers. The APs won't be as prioritized, and things like Twisted Fate just won't be in TSM. TSM just won't play that kind of champion. And so if you're not playing that, you probably have to ban it, since Cloud9 and EG have already shown that they will prioritize it. So
by the way, Crumbz,
it's important.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but like I wanted to talk about Twisted Fate this week, so I'm really glad you brought it up, and we're gonna talk about it later with Larsson as well. But right now, Twisted Fate is low key probably one of the most important picks in the world, and we haven't seen it a lot yet because we just moved to 11-15. And not to say that there were significant buffs or there were no buffs or nerfs to Twisted Fate, but the way that teams are playing in this patch is significantly, I would say, the teams that are successful are playing more early game compositions that are focused on a lot of pressure early. And if you actually look at TF right now across all major regions on this patch, he is 7-2 overall, and we've seen some of the most dominating performance, like you say, with Jizuke on EG, with Perks, but also with like Larsson, Nuke Duck, and Caps over in LEC, have put on really, really dominating performances with this champion. And even if you like, when you look at the Team Liquid Cloud9 game, for example, where Perks was playing the TF, even though they made some misplays, you know, they had some failed dives in that game, you could really just still see the power of the champion because of how much they could keep the pressure on, so that the mistakes really didn't matter as much.
I think what also helped them out, because he was, I think, popular in spring, kind of dropped off, not a lot of changes happened, and then the introduction of Tier 2 Gold made it so that now playing 1-3-1 means that you can push the split push advantage beyond just tier 1s to tier 2s, and then taking Baron is too easy. Then you actually have a surplus of gold. Then you can just never team fight and look for flanks since you've already taken out the map. So that, I think, slowly is being caught onto. And yeah, TF, you just have to play him. If you don't, and you don't have an answer, which your answer really is just shove him in, right? You just push and group together with the support and the jungle and just ward around him. But that's still not enough because he's just going to slip in the lane, get a dive in the bot side, kill your jungler, kill the top side, and it's just too much damage on the side lanes that I think it's just a pick that you have to prioritize right now. We've seen like a Silas was the answer that some teams do try since you could just copy the ultimate, but it's just not as good. Like,
he's been nerfed too.
Yeah. Like the champion is just too powerful with the sustain that you can go, and you can go potion or refill. What is it? Corrupting potion with dark seal, lucidity boots, and then how do you push him out of lane? Like, he's just TPing back. He's got spellbook to run through heal and clarity, whatever you need to get back to lane. So I think that this pick, and it always comes back to playoffs. Every single time playoffs happen around the world, you got to play globals. Every single time. It's just a rule in league. Globals dominate best ofs.
Here's the team that this helps the most. It is Cloud9. Like, if you even saw in that game, dude, Perk still isn't even vaguely like at the elite level you want him to be at. He's still having like some pretty dodgy. He still dies half the time early in the game. But mate, that game right there. What's funny is, to me, I find the whole Perks decision in Cloud9 really bizarre because people only talk individually. Like, they talk as though he's supposed to be like either the MVP of the league or he's doing nothing. You can see his DNA all over how that team plays. Like, they are constantly the ones making all the plays. They're the ones who instantly with decisive movements. Like, when he had that TF game, as you say, they just 24/7 kept the pressure up. Like, Team Liquid literally had about 3 scenarios where they were just gifted like 3 or 4 kills. Like, if anyone didn't see the game, Jensen did nothing in the game except one good Shurima shuffle. He just was given int kills over and over again while he was on Azir. But it didn't matter, literally, because the joke was, if you looked at the way the game meant, Team Liquid needed to just essentially be gifted like 5 fights in a row. They could never have won this game. It was mental. Like, so to me, actually, I think Cloud9's a team where if TF's played loads, that's what I've liked about Perks is in the games where I notice he realizes, like, I'm playing like shit, I'm definitely not just like smashing the lid. He just roams all game long. It's like the Zoe picks all the time. Like, the champion pool looks right there for them to actually be pretty legit in the playoffs.
It actually contrasts PoE's pool where he has to play on all the time. Now, he's consistent at it, but if you ever slip up and you're playing control mages, you can't just roam around and try to salvage the game that way. You always have to be the carry. So I think that being flexible in not just what you play, but the level at which you're playing on the day, how you're feeling, and that translating into your champion pool is a better way to approach a best of. We saw last split. TSM in the best of season, it just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough firepower with simply control mages to catch these teams off guard. It's no longer, hey, I can just stomp you. You're control mage versus a control mage. You don't have another choice to play against me. If I just constantly leave the lane and set up dives like they did level 3 bot lane and just never show up to lane, there's nothing that the control mage player can do.
If we take a look at Power of Evil's champion pool from summer as well, his top 4 most played, like you're saying, Crumbz, are Victor, Orianna, Azir, and LeBlanc. And even though I think that there are some kind of global alternates that you could have, like Ryze is a very good example.
Joke there, being what year from Power of Evil was that?
Yeah, exactly.
Every year, I know.
It just never changes. The thing is, his next played champion is Viego, right? And Viego has been nerfed in 11-15, so he's not going to have the same lane sustain. He's basically just a jungler at this point in time, if we're going to be real. So I think it's going to be really tough overall for TSM with this champion pool. Like you said, it also locks in Spica more or less to AD junglers, which is an issue in and of itself. And Huni basically is locked into AD top laners too, as a result. I mean, you look at what Huni's been playing, it's been Nocturne, Lee Sin, Gnar, Viego, Jace for a large part. So, I mean, even though TSM has been good at coordinating with these team compositions, there's a couple of things that give me pause. One of which is that it's very easy just to play passively with these kind of team compositions and then wait for your opponents to make a mistake, which is, to TSM's credit, how they often win LCS, not through proactive plays in the past. Again, completely new team, but not through proactive plays, but for waiting for their opponents to throw. And secondly, I mean, this is problematic because it's very transparent what they're doing strategically. There is not a lot of depth to what we've been seeing from TSM overall. And it's like, you know what you're going to get? You're going to get Sword Art on some sort of tank engage champ, whether that's Leona or Nautilus or Braum. You're going to get some level of pressure in the early lane, synergizing with these engaged champs like Kalista from Lost, and then you're going to get the mages in the mid lane. You're going to get some sort of, at this point in time, probably 80 jungler and then an 80 top laner. And it's a safe strategy, and it's good in best of ones, but I really am skeptical about their ability to pull off best of 5 victories. I mean, not to say that they can't win a best of 5, but I don't think they're going to win enough best of 5s to win the split.
I think Hooney's still a question mark as well, mate. Like these last few weeks, like even that game they had against Cloud9, mate, he went out of his way to try and hit that game. Some of the deaths he has are just totally unreasonable.
I think they're gonna face off against Cloud9 actually, out of the teams. But I'm looking here at the match, and it seems to me, if I remember correctly, they actually went 3-0 against C9 in the whole split.
Fair enough.
So I don't think though that the Cloud9 that played in those best ofs was the Cloud9 that will show up to play best of 5s, and they still have to go through TL. And it's kind of shown that playing in upper bracket is almost never really a benefit, or as large as a benefit that people think. Yes, you are one best of away from winning, but if you just get to warm up in the lower bracket, still having that extra life, and then you get to play, it seems like the scouting isn't really that big a deal. Just having the experience, having to play and be warmed up seems to do a lot more for you, as teams can often just implode having to wait 2 weeks to play. Right, TSM now has to wait 2 weeks without having to try anything on stage, and they might just get to 3 days before the actual matches, and suddenly like, oh shit, the strategy that we played just doesn't work anymore, or we're not confident in it. So I actually think that a lot of the times you want to continue that streak of playing and not break that habit that you built on a very long split already.
Speaking of which, by the way, there is that clip on my favourite show, TSM Legends, where when they were having one bad week a couple of weeks ago, because remember, it obviously has like a lag as to when the show gets released, there is the clip where you can go and look. Bjergsen literally just, no joke, says some mad line like, nothing you can do with this team, and just leaves the room, like literally in the middle of like a fucking
really?
team. Oh, it's hilarious, mate. You'd have to go back and watch it. They watched it on Face Check, and I like that's what alerted me to it. And I went, look, it's hilarious, mate. It's so fucking funny. That's like I say. Well, by the way, we actually probably will do this in the future. In the future, right, when some other things have been set in place, me and Monty will probably just do a content series where we just find the best shit like that. Maybe we'll even use fans that you guys can recommend if something funny happens on one of these shows, because there's so many reality shows out there. We should really do like a sort of react to of just the best shit, you know.
So the thing about that is, if you guys missed us doing it to Breaking Point for Cloud9, you should go check that out on the Cloud9 YouTube channel. But we've been talking for a while about doing like an Action Bronson.
It'd be a slam dunk, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Style like green screen show. By the way, Weed Maps, if you want to sponsor our new show about smoking a joint and watching and reacting to this content, please, by all means, contact.
I mean, here's the thing: people haven't even thought it through. As long as we pre-record it and have the ability to edit, we'll just actually get legit, just get high. It might be the best content you've ever seen.
I think it would be. I think it really would be.
I've got the safety net. It's not literally live. Listen, I'm a fucking ham. Don't even worry about it.
You can come over to my place, Alberto, and join us for that.
I will be there.
So anyway, jokes aside about that, yeah, we definitely
not a
that
joke,
would be
though, kind of serious. It's joking,
no, that would be serious.
What's making though is that like that really shows you how TSM season's been made. Like I know they were trying to act after this last week, like, well, this is exactly where we should be, top of the league, and it's all good. It's like you can put a nice veneer on it, but you yourselves were melding like 3 weeks ago because it was looking fucking dodgy until the end there. And also, how are you ever as TSM fans gonna fucking brag about this particular result? Oh, you mean the one where they got a fucking guy from Schalke and that didn't make them win the league, and then your two main rivals intentionally crippled their own rosters, and then you just beat out EG essentially. Great job. So all you actually did, the only team you actually beat that was late was EG, because, and even then they technically brought in like that rookie player, but the other teams all did it to themselves, and you're proud of that? I'll never understand TSM. I'll never understand them.
Beat the Thieves.
Yeah, of course. But they've got, mate, that's the only real, there's only them and EG in terms of like the legit teams, aren't there? So what are you bragging about? That's what I'm saying. Like, if anything, logically, if TSM's as good as the fans say, they should be like 10 games clear at the top of the league or something. Like, this was the split where you could have just racked up wins all over the place, you know? That's what my point, like I said before, is I just don't think anyone should feel that proud at the top. That's why my mentality would be the opposite. Be like, no, but this is the most wide up ones. All of us can win. So let's just see. That's why, actually, by the way, I say it could be the best LCS playoffs because it's the double elim format. Like, we can actually have every good matchup we want in theory. I was just doing that because of the fly in my face.
Which matchups are you looking forward to?
You,
then?
I was a boy. I don't know if you know this. In England, if you go to a fish and chip shop, right, those are real things. It's not just like some fucking comedy skit. The real art thing there. When you go there, right, it's super common that they have those. I don't know if you have this in America. You have like a machine on the wall that looks like sort of a radiator with like exposed elements, almost like a toaster. You can see the element, right? And no joke, the only purpose of this machine is flies get attracted to the sound and get burned to death on it, right? As a kid, I used to go. I used to think as a kid, oh, that's so fucking evil. I'll tell you what, doing this show right now with that fly, I would fucking install 4 of these things and just like suck these motherfuckers into it and just burn them alive.
I figured that's what this show was for TSM fans.
In some ways, they can't resist it, can they? No, yeah. They hear the they're just going, maybe I can just touch it but not be burned. God, they're consuming my soul alive. Like,
it's weird because the one I have, you can literally put other lights that are even brighter than that one around the house. But they will still be attracted to that one light. The light that will kill them is the one that they're like, ooh, why is this one so much more interesting? And they'll always fall for it. And then they see a graveyard of other flies and mosquitoes around, right?
I know.
And it's not even like they're all dead. Like there's some that are just twitching, like telling them, like, please run away. And it's like, oh, but maybe I'm the one. Maybe I could touch it.
Beautiful.
And just before they die, they go, rent free. Burn alive, because that's how stupid TSM. I know exactly.
By the way, Thorin, I loved your tweet about TSM fans are paying your rent.
Pretty good, wasn't it? Because people don't get
the free rent.
People do this thing, Monty, which just shows how bizarre the parasocial relationship between people who watch content on the internet is and the people that they think they're interacting with. Right? They always tell me I'm the one who's living rent free. Some of these people now, Monty, on Reddit, no joke, have now been tweeting about us in this show for 7 fucking years of their life. Like, I don't know if you guys are aware, if this was actually a real studio show and you lived anywhere within the same city, well, this would be the time where we would actually get a real life, like, fucking, like, restraining order on people like you, fucking nutters on Reddit. Like, you would actually literally have, like, you wouldn't be allowed to come within a certain distance of the studio. Like, it's getting weird. Meanwhile, they would go like this, Monty, but you and Monty do that by talking checks notes about one of the most popular teams in the region. Like, yeah, that's exactly the same. You guys win again. We're the ones that are obsessed because we won't stop talking about TSM. By the way, spoiler, do you imagine if TSM just left LCS, we'd still be talking about it every week? I don't think so. So you haven't really thought that one through, have you? We sort of talk about it because it's relevant. You're just nutters, you know.
All right. I want to go back to the TSM Cloud9 game, though, that you mentioned, Crumbz, because, like, you were like, oh, yeah, you know, Cloud9 has lost to TSM all 3 games in summer. Well, I think if you actually look at that last game, so there's, I will be a Cloud9 apologist for a minute, which is to say this. Cloud9 has been getting every single round robin. They've been winning more games overall, so they have been improving every time they go through. Did they, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, lose to TSM? Yes. Now, should they have lost that game where they double TP'd in the base and tried to win the game, even though they were winning team fights and could have won that team fight around the Elder Dragon and closed it out? My answer would be no. And that was with Perks having an appalling early game on Zoe.
Oh, so a bunch of times, yeah.
I mean, for me, I don't really view that as evidence that like TSM
it's hard to brag about that as a win, isn't it? Yeah.
Because it felt more like a throw. So there were, I mean, both teams threw. Like, I don't want to say like Cloud9 threw it because TSM had a strong early lead and then they took the top inhibitor and then didn't do anything, you know, fed Fudge a ton of gold on Viego, ended up losing late game team fights. And then it was Cloud9's turn to throw and like do the double TP instead of finishing out the Elder Dragon fight that caused them to lose. But it was an extraordinarily close game. It was a very exciting game overall. And so for me, I'm not taking a look at the most recent match and saying this is a best of 5 that C9 can't win if they beat TL.
think anyone could win based on that game. Because as you say, like, first of all, I'll definitely say that, as I alluded to with Hooney, TSM was in control a bunch of times and just pointlessly gave up like a death here and there to just open the door again. And Cloud9 probably had like 2 or 3 chances to win that game. In fact, I thought the most egregious thing about the way that game ended there, Monty, is no one's acknowledging that there was a third option. So there's 3 options, right? Everyone's nailed the first 2. You stay doing the dragon or you go and do the base race. Here's what I don't understand, is why Cloud9 took the third option, which is they went for the base race, then when it wasn't working, just stayed and died, and then the game was over. Like, I don't understand that part, mate. Like, to me, when the inhib respawns, let's just walk out the base. Like, you know, the game isn't over, right? We're in a great position. Why they then let themselves die and then the fucking whole game was over? I'll never understand that. That's one of those ones where it's like someone like triple guessed themselves on that move, because you know, like, you could abandon that and it would still be like an even position game almost. You know, it wouldn't have been the end of the world.
I think they just didn't see it. Like, I'm rewatching it right now. They really just did not time the inhibitor. And even when the second TP came through, it came through after the inhibitor was in animation. So it was clear that the Viego was not looking at the inhib, was looking at the Nexus. So they had just had no idea that the inhib was coming back up.
I mean, it's just super unfortunate.
That's still their mistake. It's still their error. You have to time that.
Yeah, it's a mistake, but you know, this is a very edge case scenario that happened. But even then, like, even if the inhibitor still hadn't come up, I still don't think it's the right call to TP 2 people there. I think you TP 1 and then see if you can actually provide some level of pressure onto the Nexus itself, and then you finish out the Elder Dragon and you just plan to back off if the one person TPing. I think TPing 2.
They didn't hedge at all, Monty. What they did is if people don't understand the concept financially of hedging. It's not the idea that, like, I'm too scared to go with what I think, so I'm just going to do it. No, the reason you do it goes like this, right? There are certain types of failure that are catastrophic. They only wreck your entire business. You've got no money. You have no chance to start over again. So what you do is you hedge against failures like that. So what we're saying here is, yes, obviously your chances of actually ending the game are better if you teleport 2 people. But if you do it the way they did, the downside is you lose the entire game. This way, if it didn't work, you're just kind of an even scenario still. Like, it's like TSM gained much from one person dying and not getting the base. Like, that's what was weird about that decision. It was too all in. You didn't need to be all in that scenario. Anyway, the point is, TSM absolutely...
It was a close game, and Perks was running it down early.
Yeah, he was,
which has been a trend,
running it down.
Which is a trend at the moment, mate. Yeah. The good news is this. I always say this when I do the watch parties. If we ever watch a Cloud9 game and Perks like ints once or twice early, I always just tell him the good news is he will 100% be roaming all game long from now on. Because one thing I like about Perks is he actually understands there's no point just being in behind in lane and then arriving at a team fight 25 minutes later. You actually have to do something if you're behind. You have to be useful in some way. Now, you might disagree with some of the players they make, like they were trying to do like a dive simulator yesterday or whatever it was, but when they work, you can see it definitely changes the game. Not a lot of other teams have that. In fact, here's the real interesting thing. If you think about it, the only other team that's similar to Cloud9 in that sense is EG, because with their fucking mid laner, they also will roam and just gank top lane all the time or go to the bot lane. Those 2 teams, that's what's going to be quite interesting if you think about it. On the one hand, you've got Jensen and fucking PoE, who are never leaving lane or leaving 1CS ever. They're like old school Froggen from that episode about High from 2014. They're just staying for the CS, Monty. So you know the way those teams are going to play. And then you have Jizuki and Perks, who, as far as I can tell, just know that you just try and win the map, mate. You don't try and win your lane.
It's like a different way of winning, of losing gracefully, right? Instead of just hugging your turret and finding the bare minimum CS you can get, you can just find plays to make around the map instead and just say, all right, if you're going to try to stay and pressure me here, I'll find a way to wiggle out and do something else on the map. So I just think it's a smarter way of playing the game instead of admitting that you're not going to do anything. It's much more proactive.
So with this said, let's take a look at the starting matchups, because we mentioned the C9 TL1, which was played out in a best of 1 with, as we noted, Perks on the Twisted Fate, and despite the big ints that happened. So what's your take on Team Liquid now that they actually have Santorin and Alphari back? Jensen has not had a particularly good split by Jensen standards overall, but on the other side, neither is Perks. So what are the advantages that you're looking for in this matchup? Because it seemed you implied earlier by saying that you thought there would be a C9 versus TSM matchup that C9 will win this best of 5.
So I have not seen TL come up with advantages throughout most of the split that don't come off of Alphari stomping the lane. If Alfari is not stomping the lane so hard that it is just a game that they cannot come back from whoever is losing that lane, then TL wins. If they don't, then they need to have multiple players play well at the same time, which has never happened for a TL. It's just, for some reason, the players are always, one of them is just always not playing well while the rest might be doing fine. And they're lucky if they get 4 out of 5 playing well. If anything, you need someone like Core JJ to be entirely active on the map, or else there's just nothing that TL is going to be doing together. I think they struggled a lot with Armeo in the majority of summer. And then the Jenkins experiment, we still don't really know what that was about. But I think that with Santorin, they still need time. It's just too little time. You have not had him in the lineup this much, and he has played a lot less than Armeo. And so bringing him in without stage practice, I think is not going to be as effective as it would have been had he come in maybe a week earlier and he'd practiced a little bit more. Maybe now the team would be playing a little bit more coordinated in the sense that more than one player is playing fine. But I thought consistently that when TL is facing off against one of the legacy top laners, and I just say legacy because these guys have been around for a long time, Impact, Huni, Someday, and Fudge, just because he happens to be quite good, that's when they can't get an advantage topside that just blows the game wide open, right? These are players that have been around for a long time for the most part. So unless they are against someone in the lower side of top lane champion pool, they're just not winning because the rest of the team isn't creating advantages. And when they have to group up together, they haven't been coordinated.
I think what's the Team Liquid game, it is interesting because the C9 Team Liquid game did potentially have an impact on the standings, because even though it was unlikely that Evil Geniuses was going to lose to the 100
Academy
Thieves
team,
Academy team, that the match was between TL and C9 was played first. So we can say that both teams, especially Cloud9, were very interested in winning, because if there was a fluke, what would have happened is Cloud9 would have ended up, in the third seed. So that's pretty important, because that team plays Dignitas first. And like, if you're looking at the bracket, and one thing that Parth was complaining about on Twitter, which I do think has some relevancy, is like, there isn't reseeding. So would you rather be in the side of the bracket with Dignitas, where you can face 100 Thieves, who's probably been, well, according to record, the worst team over the summer split? I think we can argue whether you might, if you think that you can prep very well for TSM based on what we talked about earlier, you could potentially view TSM as a weaker opponent in a best of 5. But I think it's relatively even overall, given the way that things are currently operating between these two teams. So that match should be taken as like a really legit, a really legit game, even though it was the last game of the season, which are often throwaways. Now, that said, Cloud9, to your point, did attack top lane very hard. I mean, you could really see that the game plan was to just to keep crashing the minion wave into the top turret so that they could dive Alfari, using Blabber, using perks on the TF. Now, did they make a bunch of mistakes? Was Jensen there a lot of the time to counteract these dives? Yes, that's why he ended up, like, I think 5-1 early on into the game. But the strategy was, you could definitely see that this was Cloud9's plan, and that I assume that it's going to continue to be their plan next week.
What's curious is that this was also their plan for finals.
Yes.
In finals, when they beat him in summer, they just camped top, right? It's just a disrespect for everybody else, saying, we know that your only win con is Alfari. If he never gets off the ground, if Fudge always has a matchup to win and we can camp it, then we're just going to stomp this. But that's where I think TL can maybe answer back with Twisted Fate. They have played it. They didn't play it at the end of the season. But Jensen, I had doubts in spring. He pulled it out. It looked decent. They had some wins on it. So I think that could be a pick that will allow them to maybe get 1, maybe 2 wins on a best of. And if you can do that and then play the other games tightly, there's a good chance you can actually find an upset. But it just has to revolve around pathing to top, helping that side out. And then if you're constantly playing this strategy that the enemy is also aware of, tactical and core have to be on their game.
By the way, speaking of which, one of the reasons I have a hard time knowing if even Core JJ is good now is this motherfucker's on babysitting duty every game. Dude, tactical is what this motherfucker. He didn't
Fell off
even
real
get more
hard.
than
He's
one
a
split
saint,
in his
man.
whole career.
Core is a saint.
People were acting like this guy's like a fucking like legend of the season. Mate, after what I've seen this year, look, maybe things can change next year, but this year alone, he doesn't warrant being on Team Liquid. He's literally a liability. Dude, think about this last game he just played. This motherfucker can't even dodge on Ezreal. You shouldn't be playing the champion then. It's literally a champion where if you're not the AD carry on the other team, you're like, this is garbage, you can't ever get to the guy. You can if you're fucking playing, because this motherfucker uses the Ezreal E and the fucking Tristana jump to go in and die. He's unbelievable. It's like jacking up without all the upside.
The thing is, tactical is actually really good when he's playing champions that have no mobility.
Yes.
When he has Varus, when he's Xayah, when he's Aphelios, that's when he looks awesome. When he's playing Tristana, when he's playing Ezreal, right? He's overthinking the mobility, and then he's playing very safe when he doesn't have it. And so the thing is, TL is like, well, they have a lot of things to jump you. Maybe we should give you mobility so that we can not babysit you. And then when that happens, now you're getting a worse performance. So they just have to trust that, hey, you're gonna have to play better with the lack of mobility and safety tools.
Well, what happened though? Because Tactical made his name when he came into the scene on Ezreal and Tristana, and so it's weird to me that he's completely reversed his skill set.
I mean, I will give him this one piece of leeway, which I give to everyone in Team Liquid for this year, which is all of them, in my opinion, get an extra pass when you consider all the fucked up shit with their coach.
Yep.
They literally didn't have their jungler for the majority of the year. Like, I'll give them all like a mild pass performance-wise. So, like, for example, maybe he's trying to be a hero there and try and jump in and all the rest of it. You know, like, players sometimes when they're young will do that. Like, that's a... Put it this way, in a way, I prefer that to the guy who just, like, slowly loses the game every time. But the problem with his case is he is the fucking AD carry, so it just looks really egregious when you die in these, like, scenarios. So then team fights are just happening without the AD carry. It's like, what's the point in you being in the game then?
I mean, I think it's probably still some of the earlier burnout that he was experiencing on Spring. That's probably still there. And then if you feel like you're slightly recovering from that, and then suddenly the things that you mentioned with the management, the staff, then that probably doesn't help getting over that quickly enough. So maybe he can pick it back up, but he just has such a tough position to fill because you're surrounded by some of the best players in every single role. So unless you're playing up to their level, everything else is just you're failing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Tactical's job is pretty easy. It's literally don't die as much as you can while Core JJ roams the maps and tries to get your good players ahead.
His job is basically to be Danny. I think if he gets
but Danny's the better Tactical
Danny,
now.
Right. Yeah, Danny's the new Tactical.
That's my problem is that Tactical can't even be the best Tactical anymore. Danny is now the best Tactical. So what's going on?
Ironically is, yeah. With that said, though, I'm not going to go and do the same exact thing people do Tactical. I think that Danny's the new future. I think, you know what? New rule, 2 splits. Then we're allowed to say you're really good. Is that too much to ask, for fuck's sake?
Look, I don't think Danny's super good or anything about like that. As we've discussed,
his role in that team, though. Yeah,
I think he just does the job he needs to do on Evil Geniuses to enable the good players on Evil Geniuses. The way that his playstyle has unlocked Jizuke and Impact is what's important, not the fact that he is the best AD carry in the league, which, by the way, EG just doesn't need. They don't need that player.
I mean, that's why they had definitely at first, right? They're like, we're not gonna play through bot. We're just not gonna play through your lane. We're gonna leave you alone, just farm and not die, and then maybe try to carry some fights if we can't pick up the slack. So that's what you want. Like, that's what you want for most ADs right now, at least. Just don't die. Just do your job, right? We don't need you to stand out.
Apply pressure. Put Tristana bomb on turret and knock it over.
Demolition expert. That's the role that should be really reinforced in an AD carry. Like, you don't see champions, you see plates, you see turrets, and you see waves. The champions are secondary.
Yeah, if you're Callista, maybe you see like a dragon or a baron that you're going to auto attack until you can rend it to death.
So basically, that's the job of the ADC, Demolition Man now. So someone get the poster of Demolition Man, edit in tactical, and then you can put some sort of meme like he still hasn't figured out the 3 shells or whatever that fucking reference was, where, getting into a bad accident in the toilet.
That was when Cutie was most depressed about playing AD carry because he realized that we didn't need him for anything in the game except killing turrets. It's like, I'm never in a fight. It's like, that's exactly it. You sit in the side lanes and you farm.
With a Sheen.
Yeah, you play Jinx, you play Tristana, you kill turrets. That is your job.
I don't know. Sounds pretty easy to me. Stress is off at that point in time, right? You're not expected to make plays. It's just up to your mid laner to TF board into your lane and then tank the turret for you while you shoot the champion.
Scary though, because you're not expected to make plays, but you're expected not to die. So you're always on the run. So you end up being very paranoid all the time that there's someone in a brush just waiting for you.
To bring this back to the LCS stuff, though, the sad thing I do think about this scenario is when I said all those different names, like there's 5 teams in theory could win. Of all the 5, as crazy as it sounds, Team Liquid feels the least likely to actually win. Because like the problem they have is they still on paper have the players. Most of those players have only made it to the playoffs on paper. They haven't made it as the players you imagine they are. And they've also realistically never really had a great point at any point in this split. Like they never really had like 2 weeks they could string together where they were really good. So I have to say, like, of all the teams, I would even take people like TSM over Team Liquid at this point in time. Like, I just haven't seen anything. Like, what miracle are they going to work in the next few days to suddenly turn it around? Like, it just looks to me like they're going to be like the 4th or 5th team.
It just feels like Jensen is demotivated by everything that's happened.
He doesn't give a fuck. He's checked out mentally, mate, completely.
I think he's just done for this year. Yeah. I mean, and I don't blame him. If I was Jensen and I'm sitting here and we get Alfari and I'm psyched to have another soul later on my team that can kind of live up to my own individual ability, and then through whatever happened, fuckery that ended up happening this split, you get within 1 game of winning the LCS in spring with a sub jungler. So you're like, wow, we did pretty good. Really unfortunate what happened to Santorin because of his health. And then you kick off this split with all eyes on you, allegedly going to have a strong start. All of a sudden, some bullshit happens. Alfari's out and Santorin's health issues come back. It's really hard just not to mentally throw in the towel until next year at this point in time, because it just kind of feels like a lost cause. You were never able to generate the synergy that you could have. And I think that the bright spot of getting so close to winning spring was the candle was immediately doused by all of this other shit that happened that was outside of their control. So, frankly, I wouldn't be playing that hard either.
I mean, it's actually curious because if Jensen would justify that loss by thinking, great, we couldn't have done it, or it was close, we had a sub jungler, then in the back of his mind, he's thinking, I'm always playing with subpar players. Like I'm never playing with the players that I wanted to play, that I knew we could win.
This isn't what I signed up for.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're always thinking that, like, the thing that makes you accept the loss is now hurting your chances in the regular season. And it's a long ass season. And then you didn't have to just deal with the jungler, but now the top. So it's a lot of shit that suddenly after 3 round robins just compound into, all right, now we swap back. Now that I just finally got used to accepting that this was going to be a thing, now we're swapping back. And like, how much time do I have to actually deal with this? I'm not sure if I believe this is possible anymore.
And also, like, realistically, if you are not in your best individual performance and you're looking at the teamwork being shaky because of all these players subbing in and out, your only real win condition due to your bot lane's performance is Alfari, because Jensen's performance isn't anything to write home about right now. Do you really want to go to Worlds? Like, how long do you want to prolong this misery? Because people don't understand this about, like, players are like, yeah, I really want to go to Worlds, but people don't understand what that means, guys. If you lose in playoffs, you only play from February to August in your domestic league. You guys want to go to Worlds? Guess who's playing another 3 months into November, right? It's a lot of commitment. You have to train super hard. You have to fly over to China and live there for a long time. And how, if Team Liquid happens to get the 3rd seed and is in play-ins, well, there's another several weeks of competition that you're over in China that if you win, if you do well enough, then just drags into groups at Worlds. So it's an enormous additional pressure for players. It's crazy. Like the difference in season length for certain teams, now that the bottom 2 teams are out, like, goodbye CLG and FlyQuest, you played from, well, I guess it was January this year because of the lock-in tournament, but you played from January up until what, the first day of August, and you're done. You're done for the year. Meanwhile, guess who's getting paid the same amount of, contract? Like CLG's contracts are pretty high up there, probably comparable to many players on the playoff.
Some of that might be done with LCS
Ridiculous.
forever.
Yeah. But the thing is that sometimes player contracts do have like Worlds bonuses or playoff bonuses built into them, but basically you're getting paid approximately the same amount for what is effectively the most ridiculous grind of your entire year, which is going to Worlds, which also means that you have to be away from home and get no kind of vacation or rest.
If you're trying to cruise, this is an ideal situation, right? If you should just lie in the middle of the pack and maybe you're not as interested, but you're just skilled enough to hop around between teams, negotiate contracts that have full pay for the year.
Yep.
You're working 7 out of 12 months of the year. And if that, making 6 figures, right? Like that's a pretty
7 figures sometimes.
Yeah, 7 figures, and then suddenly you're never in the conversation for Worlds conversation. The stress is never there. You're like, oh, there's always a player on just mediocre teams, never had given a chance. So, there's some players that can really mind game this and put themselves in a really happy position, just cruising through life.
I never understood why teams don't more heavily predicate contract values on Worlds attendance to actually motivate players. Like I would, based on the number of months that you're playing, like you could prorate the contract into being 33% more valuable if they go to Worlds, which actually provides financial motivation in addition to the competitive motivation. And by the way, guys, going to Worlds is extremely valuable to the teams because that's how they sell a lot of sponsors, because Worlds is the peak of viewership. So if your team goes to Worlds, your sponsors are getting way, 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 way more eyeballs on you than you would, especially because LCS viewership is down so much. Like Worlds is going to probably, if I had to guess, and we can check in on this after Worlds is over, the value of being at Worlds for an LCS team in terms of people who will see logos on jerseys is probably 2 to 3 times minimum. And this is just in English, by the way. In the English language stream, I would say there'll probably be 2 to 3x as many viewers in terms of viewed hours on those LCS teams than the entire summer split of LCS.
I want to see 100 Thieves at Worlds just to see what their marketing department can pull off that will blow the socks off of what any other LCS team has done. Because I think that this is the only team that could really capitalize upon that extra viewership that no other LCS team has.
Team Liquid will make a Captain American jersey.
Here's the thing. So what you're talking about, Crumbz, is obviously everyone knows that like the joke is 100 Thieves is an esports team, is an apparel company that has an esports sponsorship, Basically what they would do is, nowadays people love that sort of like streetwear look where it almost looks like you're wearing like a rain jacket, those like jackets that you can pull in the little things.
I'll just a little chime in. I feel like streetwear sounds like homeless wear.
No, that's what we said. You said streetwear for like sportswear or whatever and stuff, Like basically get one of those like windbreaker things that they have now, and all you do is, because it's an NA team, you just make a special custom Worlds one with a zip there, and when you go out of Worlds in the group, you just zip up the body bag, and it becomes a black body bag that you're already wearing.
Those are I've seen those.
Mate, we can sell some fucking. We can make money, baby. Speaking of which, by the way, that's actually the good news about the LCS playoffs, right? I've always said this, right? Everyone thinks, Monty, because they just don't listen to the show. Everyone thinks my dream is TSM don't even go to Worlds. I hated those years where they didn't go to Worlds. That sucked. I love the fact that with the way the playoffs are now, TSM would probably get the 2nd or 3rd spot if we played tomorrow the playoffs. So I love the fact that TSM is going to Worlds and then they get banged out. Because think about it. Of course, I want TSM at the Worlds with 4 LPL teams. 4 of them. That means means they can't even avoid them. They're almost certainly gonna have to play one. So we need TSM to go. It's not the same without them, guys. You know, it's not. And until I get my second birthday every year, which is the day that they go out the group stage, that's my second birthday. Till we get that, we haven't really had a proper year League of Legends, have we? Wouldn't be the same.
And by the way, if you're, if you are a TSM fan and you're hoping that they go to Worlds, I hate to tell you this, but the truth about Worlds is that as soon as you go there, if you do not have world-class laners, you get banged the fuck out, guys. Like, the teams that are more than the sum of their parts are always the one to get absolutely completely wrecked at Worlds. So look forward to that. That's all I'm saying. If you're a TSM fan, because your little tricks and why you're working here and, waiting around for other teams to throw, it doesn't work in international competition, guys, where teams are actually proactive and can close leads.
Also, good luck if you actually are the playing team, because the other part they don't think about is that means when the main event starts, if you make it there, you're on like your 4th week of losing to everyone Asian that you're playing in scrims. Like, you're already deep in the heart of darkness where you don't even believe it. You're like, I haven't won a game for 2 months. Like, that's mental, mate. Like, at that point, you're mentally broken. You're done at that point in time.
One of my favorite things about those international events, though, is when you go and face off against these teams that are supposed to be top teams for the first time, and then you play against them and you realize, oh, we're just outclassed. Like, right away, you're like, oh shit. There's not enough time to get this good to actually compete with this. Like, oh my gosh, time to find some Hail Mary strategy to bring this together. And then you realize you don't have something. And then you just immediately, it turns into just, can you hold it together? Can you keep the mental game in check before you realize that there's just no hope to actually competing against these teams?
No, you can't, because you've already lost in your mind before you enter the game.
Well, that whole thing of like, you lost
in your own region before you even got to play and lose the mental game.
Right. The joke is, like, even though now we don't even do that whole the gap thing, because in theory, because LEC got like vaguely close with their best team ever, we just pretend it doesn't exist anymore, even though it definitely does. Right? Because what people don't realize is this: that whole gap conversation only seems interesting on talk shows if you don't know the players. Because if you know the players, every year there's at least 1 or 2 Western teams who have a story like this. Yeah, I played against insert the name of any of the top 6 Asian teams, and I had a 15 out of 17 game losing record. And you're just like, and that's not even, by the way, some like mad story. That's like every year there are people who have that story. Like, we literally played them 17 times and we won twice. And one of them, they were laughing in the chat and we think they might have been joking. Like, when you hear these stories, you don't even waste your time going, how do we close the gap? It's like, motherfucker, the gap has never been bigger. What are you talking about? By the way,
here's how scrims work. Here's how scrims work too, is that the team, if you're playing a 5-game scrim set and you're 4-0, that team is 1000% going to start fucking around and like give you a much better chance to win. So if you're still losing 90% of your games, and even if the ones you're winning are like, wow, that was a really weird experimental game from this team, it's like, so it's even more disingenuous when you know how teams operate and how they will kind of try and soft throw games by just, fucking around, basically, in some of the later games in a scrim block.
That's the funniest, when you win those games, but you're actually not sure if they were trolling. You're like, I'm not sure. Like, you're trying to justify that they were try-harding, but you're just really not confident in whether they gave it their all. You're like, I guess they were. Or no, we got it normally, fair and square.
That's the difference between Korea now and Korea back in the day. Like, when I used to hear stories back in the day that like sometimes an LPL team would turn up to scrims with T1 and T1 would just have like scout playing instead of faker. Like, that's the difference in like the scene. Now they'd have to fucking battle just to win a game with the real lineup. Back then, they would just send in fucking stand-ins. Like, you'd probably win anyway. Yeah, and then the joke is, and when they did win, they just did the Jack move. They're like, you can also buy him for like 4 million or whatever. Like, they weren't even trying. They were just toying with people.
I just love that attitude, because they send a Faker off to play solo queue or whatever, and they're like, Faker, this is better practice for you.
Yeah, exactly.
What we're doing right now.
It's kind of a statement when that's turned, especially if you then lose the game as well. Like, you can't say shit, can you? Like, all right, fuck me, I guess.
Too funny. So do you have any thoughts about 100 Thieves heading in the playoffs? Because we haven't talked about them a lot. But their fall was rather, I would say, sudden, especially considering how well they were doing after their roster change. It's that narrative, I think, has gone under the radar a little bit.
So I'm running out of time, so this will be my last take, and then I gotta go. So I had the take that actually Perks then reiterated, which it's like this is what called it from the start. 100 Thieves looked really good at the beginning of the season because they had a stronger meta read than anybody else. They had the Karma, they had the Akali, and they were playing these champions much better. They had the Xin. And so they ride this meta read for a while and looked so much better than any other team. As every other team picked up, started getting banned out, they just didn't have anything else. So I just don't think that this team actually is that strong. I think they're almost looking like a weaker TSM in that they just don't have that much coordination. TSM is a bit more coordinated, but 100 Thieves, I think the mid 2v2 is not as coordinated as we would have liked to have seen it. The Xin and the Karma, this combination did encourage synergies that made them both look a lot better together. When they had the early Diana read, they still look better because Diana was something that nobody could figure out yet. So I think that 100 Thieves, if they want to contest the playoffs, need to have a new read on the meta that other teams don't have yet. And right now, it just doesn't seem like that's probably going to happen. I think that as time goes by, the team probably got cocky like they said they would and would have to avoid, and started feeling like, oh, our wins are coming off of our actual skill and not actually off of our champion picks. And suddenly now they're with their backs against the wall trying to find what it is that works for them. So I think that the team has to do some soul searching real quick, because they do not look like someone that would be really difficult to beat, especially for EG, because EG stomped through Dig, then off against 100 Thieves. And I mean, Abidaga said that he'd be surprised if Jizuka wins a lane against them, but I think that might have been some hubris.
Jizuka also doesn't have to win a lane. He can just go win everyone else's lane for them. So yeah, I think
it's almost like some reverse psychology, isn't it? Like, you can't stay in lane and win against me, can you, Jizuka? It's like, I never planned to do that though. Exactly, I win. It's like, nah, I roam all the time though, isn't it? Like, yes, but you don't stay though, do you? Like, come on, Abidaga, we're not a fucking playground. He's figured this one out and he doesn't want to. Like,
right. I gotta go, guys.
Bye. We're gonna take a break. Thorin and I will be back to talk between ourselves in just a second. We're back with first place finisher in the regular summer split of LEC. It's Larsson from Rogue. Did get a little dicey there at the end. You have to admit, you won, got first place by just a single game. So last couple weeks, you guys have been, I heard Odoamne discussing this on the LEC broadcast, but with the Rogue time memes, which were fabulous coming out of Korea, I have to say.
Yeah, I love it.
I've been really enjoying the creativity of the Korean memers over there. So for what you don't know, if you didn't see it on Ashley Kong's Twitter, I think Thorin retweeted it as well, which is this kind of like pie chart of times within the game, like Rogue so dominant from 0 to 20 and from 30 minutes onward, but Rogue time is the 20 to 30 minute period where Rogue mysteriously throws their advantages that you guys have in the game. I imagine this is somewhat painful for you guys, but also has been a little bit true, and we did kind of see that this last week, even though you did finish 2-1 overall. So do you want to start by addressing this in this time period? Is this a struggle for you guys to because a lot of the times it's you trying to make proactive plays that just end badly. It's not you guys like waiting or exposing vulnerabilities. It feels like it's you guys trying to be aggressive and maybe misjudging the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's very funny, this Rogue time, and I guess Vitality, I was just laughing in game at it because it's like incredible how you can throw a 7k goal lead against not even it's not even like Mad Lions. Usually we throw it against Mad Lions.
Yes,
it's a bit of a meme, this throw lead like against other teams, but especially against Mad Lions, it's kind of true. It has been true.
Yeah.
But I mean, I told in an interview before the Vitality game that it's kind of a meme. I think that we throw the games a lot. It happens a bit, but it's like mainly against Mad Lions. And then, of course, next day we threw 7k goal against Vitality at 20 minutes, which was like the hardest stomp. I think that game will be a 23-minute stomp if we don't do that. So I mean, it's not. Yeah, actually, I forgot the question, but like.
Where's the thing though? If you think about it, right, your team literally only lost fucking Like, how many games was it in the end? Like 4? Was it 4
I
games?
think it was five.
games. Okay, so you lost 5 entire games in the whole split, right? But people are, as I say, people are mad critical because this is right. This is actually how the good news and the bad news, Larssen, is this. The good news is, on paper, this means that everyone, and this is the case as far as I can tell, everyone thinks your team is the best team in the league. In fact, the criticism implies they think you could have basically gone undefeated this split because as people are doing with the meme, your team, it seems like you always have like the good draft, the good start, the good winning lanes, like Inspired's taken over the fucking jungle. Like at that point, on paper, your team maybe could have done like a Fnatic and gone undefeated over the split. So it sounds like people are being really harsh because they are zeroing in on only a few wins, and some of them, like these ones, are super close. Like the other team barely wins. But in a way, it's like a good pressure to have in a way because it means people think you should be the best team.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we should be the best team as well, like by a bigger margin than we have shown. But I mean, I think I mean, every loss hasn't been a big throw. I mean, the games against G2 has kind of been. I don't remember the last one, but I remember we got stomped the first one. It was kind of a stomp both games, I think. Actually, the first game was a bit of a banger, I think. But yeah, I mean, they kind of won convincingly. We didn't throw these games against G2 if I remember.
I think they're in your head a little bit though, because it does seem like no matter what G2's form is, Rogue just loses to them. It's one of the only teams.
I don't know, best of ones, dude. It's just best of ones, I think. Like, it's not like in playoffs. In playoffs, it's not in our head. In playoffs, I think last year we went to game 5. It was like complete banger game 5, and I think we were pretty terrible. Like, I mean, not terrible, but we were not that good of a team back then. We're way more developed now. And like a spring split, obviously we stomped them pretty hard. I think in playoffs, they just won one game on Senna Seraphine, which was very, very unskilled. They were not doing anything. It was scaling with broken champs. So.
But you still didn't pick them. You still didn't pick G2 because you had the choice of who to select coming in. You guys ended up picking Misfits as the first seed. So there must, despite what you're saying, there still must be some reluctance there. I mean, I would have picked Misfits too, given G2 seems to be on the rise. Misfits started strong, didn't end as strong. You've got a bunch of first-time playoff players coming in on Misfits. So it seems like you should be in control in a best of 5. So I don't think you made the wrong decision, but you clearly still respect G2 to a certain degree.
Yeah, of course. I respect G2 more than Misfits since we choose them. I mean, that's obvious that we should respect G2 more since they're a strong team and they've had a way better second half split, especially. I think it seems like they only lost one game in second half, if I'm correct. At least that's what DJ Ankos tweeted. And I mean, Misfits should obviously be their opponent. I think Mad and G2 are like the 2 scariest teams to me. So yeah.
So I do want to talk about that Vitality game that you mentioned a little bit because again, the why we can discuss the Rogue time as being funny is, like Thorin saying, you guys really didn't lose that many games, and even the games you did lose should basically have been wins because you're talking about some really good early game plays, especially around the Kennen. Kennen got buffed in 11-15, so has a little bit more strength on his Q for harassment in lane right now. Odo Omne, longtime Kennen player, had some really, really good like dives and team fights in the early game, ends up getting 4 kills ahead. And so what was the cause? Like, I understand you guys had this huge gold lead, so you want to press that advantage. But my issue with some of the kind of combo comps that we're seeing, or like AoE compositions, is that it feels more than ever, and we saw this as well. Which game was it? It was the Cloud9 EG game in LCS, where some of the LCS teams have been trying these like Yasuo like knock-up combo comps with Diana. And it seems like with champions like Kennen or like Yasuo, where you're trying to pull off these big AoE strikes, that the way the game plays out these days is that if you don't take advantage of a very specific timing window in the mid game, by the end, everybody has like GA or stopwatch or Zonias, and it becomes really, really hard to win, which is kind of what we saw in the Vitality game as well.
I mean, I think Kennen is a bit different from like Yasuo Diana combo or something like that, because Yasuo Diana is very, very reliant on like Diana ult. You need to hit a very good Diana ult. It's like super, super one-dimensional. I mean, Kennen doesn't need to hit like a 5-man ult or 4-man ult. He can even hit a 2-man ult and still like be very, very useful. And I mean, this game as Vitality, it was, I mean, most are froze, or I don't think there's like one similar mistake we do every time. It's like often different individual mistakes. And then sometimes when someone fucks up, then we try to like help that person, and then we all end up dying. I think this has ended a few times. Remember against Fnatic in week 1 or something, we were quite ahead, and I died on side, and then we tried to like still fight even if I'm dead. and it happened against Vitality where Timber got caught, and even maybe I will still die, but maybe if Hans and Odo doesn't fight, we will still be able to defend the Nash. So I think there's like one individual mistake, and then we try to help that person, and then like everyone just ends up dying, and we lose the game. Because obviously, one person dies, it doesn't matter if you're still 7K goal ahead. It's completely irrelevant. Yeah, and the cannon part, I mean, yeah, as I said, I don't think you need to have a huge team fight or something. You will always be very useful in team fights. You have a lot of threat to enemies.
Do you feel like you have evolved since the spring? Because if you look at the spring playoffs and the game 5 that you lost, it feels like you guys did do exactly what you're describing, which is that when there's a mistake that's made, you guys all kind of like pile in and compound that mistake, because you were so far ahead in the game 5 versus Mad Lions, and then you all ended up kind of like one by one running into the jungle, which allowed Mad Lions back into the game. What is going, like, what has been the issue there? Because if these problems are still kind of occurring, is this a comms problem or a decision-making problem, or do you guys view it as a positive in that a lot of times, more often than not, you end up winning these engagements where you kind of all recommit to the aggression, and so sometimes it goes badly, but more often than not, you feel like it goes well?
I think it's often just someone going too deep, especially. I don't think it's like something positive that it's something we do a lot and that just sometimes doesn't work out. I think it's sometimes we tend to overextend a bit and like go too deep or just randomly get caught. Especially going too deep in like fights has been a bit of a problem. We just like have a free fight and then we just decide to go too deep instead of playing it slow. Yeah.
What do you think about your individual level of play at this split? Because if you go back a year to when you guys were again first place in the summer split last year, going into playoffs, like a lot of people had you as an actual like MVP candidate. It was between you and I think maybe Caps that time. I think it was the other player. I'm trying to think who was it. I think it was Caps that got it right.
Yeah, last year it was Caps. Yeah, last summer.
This year, your team's number one. Most people have had your team as the favourite. Historically, for you, the mid laner, for the team that people think's the best, you're nearly always the MVP candidate. I know it's on your team. It feels like people are going like Inspired or Hans Sama are the names they're picking out. So individually, have you just still been good behind them? Have you had not as good a split yourself? Where do you think you are at the moment?
I think I'm way better than like last year, for example, when I had the low-key MVP performance from last summer, where I think I was behind Caps in MVP vote. But I feel like I'm way more developed as a player. I can play way different style. I mean, back then we had like obviously a very one-dimensional style where we were like only playing for bot lane with a scaling mid like a Siriana. So I would still be very useful and have like often we're winning lane. And it was it was always the same play style. I mean, now I can play anything really. Even though maybe casters like to meme me on like 80 champs, which is a bit weird. I mean, Lucian has been my best champ to split, and they're like still meme my Lucian or something. Like, oh yeah, hasn't been that good on Lucian, but yeah. And I mean, right now I think I'm way confident than like I was 1 year ago or in spring split. I feel like I'm playing super well right now, and I'm very, very confident. I think it feels really good to play. But since I started split, I didn't have that good of a start of a split, so it's fair that I'm not up there in the MVP votes. I don't mind. Okay. It was like the development for me, the split has been like huge on a confidence level and like how I push the game. And I think, I've developed like way more this split than other splits. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's really unfair to you because I feel like the narrative that goes on around you, and I totally agree with your development as a player, because if you go back to last year, you played 2 games of Lucian last year when Lucian was a huge pick still in the mid lane. This year, it's been your most played champion across both splits. It's 14 games, right? You have a 65% win rate on this champion and higher in the summer split, but you've also added champions like Jace to your pool in a big way. You've played Akali, you played Aurelia. And so if you compare that to last year where you were mostly playing Azir, mostly playing these control mages, and the knock against Rogue was, oh, they're just going to scale for the late game and win via team fighting. And you were kind of like the current European version of Power of Evil in some ways. But this year you've gone and especially this split, you played 9 games. Your top 2 champions are Lucian and Jace. Jace tied with Orianna. But this has been a remarkable change in terms of Rogue's strategy. Of you guys this year are playing a lot more for, I would say, early game lane dominance. You've leaned more on Hans Sama's Draven. And this has been a really fascinating change both within the team, but especially with yourself that has enabled this. So do you feel that these narratives are not really fair when we look at your actual champion selection, that it's very much about lane dom, it's very much about AD, especially in the summer?
I mean, it comes from, I think, like the Jace performance weren't that good. Also, this has nothing to do with the champ. This has to do with that I just didn't play that well at start of summer split. I was taking it a bit slow because I know that playoffs is like by far the most important to like be in super good shape for. So at start I was taking a bit slow, probably a bit too slow, which was why I didn't perform that well. And I played Jace at that point. But so I understand where it comes from because my Jace games weren't the best, even though I know that this is not from the champ. This is just that I didn't play that well at this point. And also, yeah, I mean, I can play anything, honestly. And last year it was different because I think we couldn't play, like as a team, we couldn't play different playstyles than the one we did. I think we just weren't good enough to play different playstyles. So I decided to just stick with this boring style, which was scaling. And then this year, I mean, I've played a lot of TF, and I always played a lot of Akali. I remember last year in playoffs against G2, I played 4 games of Akali, so that's not like something I picked up on this year. But I've been way more free this year to just play early game champs because I know my team is very, very good. So if I play early game, like Inspired can carry or my bot lane or top is winning, so I can do a lot of snowball their lanes as well. So it's a very fun year to play in.
For me, that's also the big difference in Rogue is like Inspired was very good last year, but this year he looks like he's gone to another level, and the style of playoffs he allows him to do so much more. Like even in spring, he looked amazing, mate. He was already all over the map against every jungler he was playing, and just looked like he was just mind reading him. So what's it actually like to play with him at the moment?
I mean, it's very nice. Obviously, he's super smart about the game, and he's just super smart about the game in general. Has good mechanics, and he can play like all different playstyles. He can carry, he can play the Graves and get very ahead in jungle, or he can just play the Xin Zhao and play for his lanes. So it's obviously very nice. I think, yeah, don't have much more to say. He can do the most things, and he's a League of Legends addict, so that helps.
Do you think he should be MVP? Because I do. I think he's had an absolutely phenomenal.
Are you fair?
Yeah, I think he should be the MVP for sure. I haven't like digged into other teams like performances, like if there are any standout players in other teams that is like really stand out. But from what I've seen, I think he should be the MVP. Yeah.
What's so impressive about Inspired to me is that he makes such good decisions in the moment based around pressure and vision, and he will just be hiding in bushes that no one expects him to be in. What is the communication from him? Like, how do you adapt? I'm curious because his strategies often have kind of like multiple layers to them, where if he hides in this brush, for example, around mid lane, there could be multiple different things that happen depend on where the enemy jungler is. How are you guys communicating in those moments? Because it seems like there are so many different options of things that could happen, and yet you seem to play out these scenarios almost perfectly without complete knowledge over what the other team is potentially doing.
I mean, usually you know kind of well what any team is doing if you're aware of the game state. And I think you're referring a bit to the Xin Zhao where he was like, camping in a bush in mid lane as Fnatic.
Yep.
I don't think this is like a specific play for him where he like camps in a bush or something. This is something that happened this game.
No, as a reactive play, that's my point, is that you guys are reacting super well to the game state. He's very creative, and he will make plays in that moment, the right play, but it can't possibly be planned.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously not planned, but I think a lot of plays we do in game is quite planned. Like we have a lot of habits that we keep doing that makes us like snowball every game. We have a lot
you
of
guys
very good
actually
habits.
design it like that though? Like, do you go into the I'll give you an example. There actually are players. I know it might sound stupid to Western fans, but like the good ones can do this. There are players who are like top laners, for example, who will literally say in this particular matchup, no joke, you can literally gank me on like level 3, like level 5 if I push. Like they plan it like that, like the first sort of 10 minutes for the jungler or whatever, you know, so he knows where he can come. Are you actually going into the game with a game plan like that? Is it just loose things that in the moment you're collabing on? How would you describe it?
No, I say we definitely do not go in like knowing exactly what to do every 10 minutes, like for the upcoming 10 minutes. Usually everything we do is like on the fly. I mean, I think that's for most teams or like all teams, because you need to adapt to the game state. You never know what will happen. Every game is very different. But I mean that we have think we know like very well what to do in like all situations, because there's also situations that are very similar in the game. Since we played so many scrims, so many solo queues, so many official games, there's like all the situations you kind of get deja vus, like you know what will happen and you know what you should do often. So I think it's a very good habits against around all those normal situations that will come up.
Obviously, whenever they show us like the comms, which by the way, everyone just copies G2 and does a shit version of a funny one, but you don't have G2, which is not as funny. So, okay, we all know the way that meta works. But obviously, when they do those comms, if fans don't get it, they obviously only show like reactions and stuff. They don't tend to show the actual like real comms of something important. So, does your team actually talk much? Is it a vocal team nowadays?
Yeah, I think we talk a bit too much sometimes. Sometimes I just want everyone to shut up, honestly, in game, because sometimes I think we have just. I mean that this comes to our throws actually a bit. I think sometimes we have stressed comps. Like even if we were ahead, we don't realize maybe how ahead we are, for example, or we're not like as confident as we should be, and we're like stressing out a bit in comps, even though it's very free, and we just don't. We talk about some useless stuff, and yeah, I mean we're not. Obviously, we're not the G2 funny level in comps. We are a bit more serious. I mean, G2 are for sure a lot serious as well, but they're more funny. Yeah. But I think sometimes we talk a bit too much. I think you shouldn't talk that much. You should say the important parts, and then if you just like let everything be calm, you will like see everyone will see clearly what to do. If there's not too much information, I think everyone will clearly know what to do.
We touched on this earlier with Crumbz, but I want to talk about Twisted Fate, because you mentioned Twisted Fate earlier. It seems like Twisted Fate across the world is suddenly returning right before playoffs as a very strong pick. There were no changes that were made to Twisted Fate on 11.15, the patch you're playing right now, but a lot of teams are kind of optimizing for the early game, including yourselves. I mean, you played TF in the very dominant win you had over Fnatic this week, played really nicely. It allows you to be super proactive to kind of complement like heavy pushing or kill lanes in the side lanes. What is your take on Twisted Fate right now in its current power level? Because it just feels like a pick that's going to be extraordinarily important heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, he's definitely very strong, and he got a buff kind of with the AP mage's item buff, where it got 200 gold cheaper. That was like a bit of a buff he got. But it's also often like this when teams just realize like, oh yeah, this champ is OP, and then everyone starts spamming it. But he got the 200 gold buff. I think it's pretty big, honestly. Like TF gets his first item so fast because it also has his gold sheet bonus in passive. Yeah, and it's just a very cool champ. I think it's very strong for sure. It does everything. It just does everything very well.
Is this part of the itemization I mean, Lost Chapter getting cheaper, as you're saying, is
it was the mythic item that got cheaper. Yeah.
Sorry, Everfrost.
Yeah.
So when you come into Everfrost as an item, it's been we've seen it throughout like different parts of this year. And it offers so much to certain champions that can roam very effectively and gives them an additional, ability to CC champions or get into the back lines and snare carries. Are there any other champions that are coming up that you think are going to be able to use Everfrost well in the playoffs? Because it's not just TF that's been affected by this.
That's a good question. I mean, Sylas used to be a good Everfrost champ. It's for sure a good Everfrost champ. But it's not like only Everfrost got buffed, right? It was all AP items. But I mean, I'm not sure. Nothing too special to think about. I mean, it's just that AP champs got better with the buffs to all AP items. I think most other AP champs doesn't like to build this item. Most AP champs likes to build other items, but it's a kind of perfect item for TF. So yeah.
Are there any other changes that you think in terms of nerfs to other champions that have helped TF in the laning phase at all? Because the struggle is always trying to get enough push or pressure in the mid lane in order to open up the opportunities for roam. And so oftentimes the TF player will draw a lot of enemy jungle pressure just to make sure that he doesn't have pressure in order to make those kind of plays.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when you mentioned TF, because maybe like some other mid champs got nerfed. But I don't recall any like specific nerf. Maybe I'm a bit stupid right now. I might be stupid and not have bad memory, because I don't recall any like specific mid champ nerf. Maybe you guys remember anyone?
No, that's why I'm asking.
Not really.
Yeah, not really, right? Yeah, I don't remember anything special to any other mid champs.
I mean,
but I think maybe AP Anglers might have gone nerfed. I was trying to find something, but I'm not sure if maybe AP Anglers got a bit nerfed. Because
if anything, I think the thing that Crumbz mentioned, which I agree with, is that the Sylas nerfs increase TF's priority because you can't pick Sylas and then just steal his ult and be as effective as TF, because his laning presence is a bit weaker than it was before. But that, I don't think that directly affects it, because if that basically just makes it so you have 2 TFs on the map instead of 1.
Yeah, I mean, against Fnatic, they actually blind picked Sylas, and I picked TF into TF into Sylas. So I don't think that Sylas not really matters. I mean, at least not for me. This matchup is really whatever, I think. Actually, yeah. I don't think there's been too many changes to Milan champs when I think about it. It's been kind of the same Milan champs the whole split, besides when AP items got buffed.
When you look at the playoff field overall, I'm curious what your take on some of the teams are. Vitality managed to kind of squeak into the 6th place, partially because they beat you.
Yeah, we troll Excel really hard. We troll Excel really hard.
Which I kind of feel. I mean, even though I was very excited to see Vitality with this roster, and I think it's unfortunate that they didn't deliver as much as they could this split. Also, very unfortunate for XL, because they were certainly one of the most improved teams and one of the most exciting teams to watch.
Yeah,
but either way.
I think if we won against Vitality, X will be in playoffs. I think so, at least.
Yes,
I'm not sure, but
it would have been XL, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, so we trolled them very hard.
I'm curious. Would you rather have Vitality or XL in playoffs?
I mean, it would be funny if the first team beats Fnatic, because it's funny if Fnatic loses like already in the first round. And I felt like when I was talking about that, XL would have better chance against Fnatic. So I guess I'd rather XL, but I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. But it'd be fun if Fnatic lost the first round for sure. So I was kind of cheering a little bit for XL. But Vitality has a good chance anyway. They just went 3-0, so I guess they're on a hot streak.
I think Fnatic rather was a team that was, they were in first place for part of the split in the middle, and then they've fallen really far down since then, and you absolutely demolished them in the game that we talked about this last week. What is your take on Fnatic right now? Why they were so good kind of early and mid, and then fell off so hard towards the end?
I think best of ones are very weird. Like in regular season, we can always talk like how teams are performing, but best of ones are always a bit random, honestly. So like. And I feel like anything can happen in regular season. Like some teams might look really good, but they're actually not that good because it's just best of ones. They might just have had some lucky games, or however you want to call it. But I also think they're a bit one-dimensional team. They have a lot of very clear habits that we know very well. Like we know very well how they will play. We know what things they will do. And I think other teams has probably realized as well. So that has probably been a bit of the downfall. And yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but it seems like they lost a lot of... They played us and we stomped them, and then it seems like they lost a lot of games after that. So I'm not sure what happened, but yeah.
What do you think of Niski at the moment as a mid laner? Obviously, years and years ago when he played was before you were in LEC. What do you think about him currently as a mid laner?
Niski is definitely a good player. I always thought it was stupid when he got like so much hate when he went from Cloud9 to Fnatic. Like people were doubting him so much, but I always thought he was a good player. It's not like... it's not scary to play against him, but I know that he is a smart player. He can always do things well on the map, for example. So it's definitely, I think he got his recognition this split like a bit. He's not he's not underrated anymore. I think he was underrated in the past, especially next spring split. It seems like people realized like he's playing very well right now, or like well. So yeah.
I think Niski he grew a lot as a player over the course of this year. He impressed me in ways that he really didn't impress me when he was on Cloud9. It feels like he has dimensionalized and been able to carry a lot of their games. So if anything, I think that's been one of the bright spots for Fnatic, is that he has overperformed the expectation. And especially when he came into Fnatic too, the expectation was never that he was going to be the star player of that roster. That wasn't the intent on bringing him on board. He was supposed to be a supporting element for, self-made and well, at the time when he joined, he thought reckless, right? So yeah, that obviously changed pretty dramatically, pretty quickly. But I think when he in many ways was asked to step up, and I think it's also very hard to adjust to switching out self-made for Bwipo halfway through the year. I think if anything, he has massively overperformed expectations given the kind of curveballs that he was thrown.
I mean, that's what you say. Yeah, you think so. You said that he has overperformed a lot, and that's what I don't really think. I think he has been underrated, so I don't think he has overperformed that much. But maybe you were in Cloud9, so maybe you didn't perform well in Cloud9. So I'm not sure. I didn't watch enough Cloud9 to really judge him, but I guess you guys have watched a lot of Cloud9. I don't know how he performed over there. Yes.
He was fine. He did his job, but his job was not to be. He was basically like Doinby from when they won Worlds. It's like he was doing a job on the team. He was NA Doinby effectively before Doinby got way better in the
Doinby. Yeah, I mean, he's not as good as Doinby as relative to his peers, but yeah, he's gotten better in that sense, better laner for sure.
Yeah. I think expanded his champion pool to be a threat on more champions, but you say he was like underrated. We're using different language. Like you're saying he was underrated previously, so he's performing as you expected. Whereas my opinion was like
your opinion was pretty low of him. I can see.
It wasn't low. No, it wasn't low. I mean, he did a good job on the iteration of Cloud9. It was not that my opinion was low. It's that he was a role player designed to support other stars and maybe not capture the center stage in the same way or be expected necessarily to carry the game. He was there to facilitate other players being the dominant force.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, and definitely that's very true. That's for sure very true because he definitely has played more carry champs this split and. Not sure what he played in Spring Split, but definitely this split has played a lot of carry champs. Like he even plays Irelia and stuff. Maybe not a great success, but he tries to play a lot of carry champs. So he's changed his playstyle a bit, and maybe Bwipo coming in, she made him change playstyle a bit more to carry. Maybe Bwipo is more supportive than self-made. I'm not exactly sure about Jungle. Maybe I'm talking shit. I might be talking shit right now because maybe. Maybe Bwipo is just more supportive and he wants to play more carries with him. I'm really not sure, but he's definitely played a lot more carries.
Yeah, seems plausible.
I'm not sure though. But.
I even think in his team, if you look at it, it's even a team that's perfect for Niski. You have the jungler and the support are both super high fee players that want to go around the map and make players. I was saying this the other day, Monty. They deserve in Fnatic to have that old term from KT Bullets brought back, the roaming gank squad. That's what these fucking players are like. That's a totally different dimension. Because think about what they had in last year. They had self-made, super selfish jungler, and a fucking mid laner who essentially just stayed in lane 24/7 farm under his fucking tower, on control mages. Obviously, Larsson just stays slightly ahead of the tower, superior version. You get a bit of a say. I'm not just aware of the company we're in here. No, here's the problem, though. I'll resolve this whole issue for you. Because you guys are splitting hairs. Listen, Niski wasn't that great in the past. Yeah, I agree. Is he better now? Yes. It's irrelevant, though, because he's not winning LEC and he's definitely not fucking going to Worlds. So we can forget about all that. This bottom match here, by the way, Fnatic Vitality is the most worthless game ever. Neither of these two teams are going to Worlds. Who gives a fuck? They're both flawed teams, in my opinion. So it's not hate on either of them.
Fnatic, they're a flawed team, but they have a lot of talent. They definitely have a lot of talent, and on a good day, they can definitely. I think they can reach. Yeah, I think if they have a good day, they can definitely reach Worlds. So I won't count them out like you do. But you're maybe a Fnatic hater, Thorin. You're a hate Fnatic.
No, I just think that Rogue, Mad Lions, and G2 are better.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You against me on that one?
I agree, definitely. I agree, but I won't say they are completely doomed out of Worlds.
But this way, I actually think, similar to what I was saying about LCS, except the difference is the top teams in LEC are pretty good as well. I actually think the playoffs is pretty stacked in LEC this year. This isn't one of those ones where it's can SK win us? These teams are never going to win series. Okay, sure, Vitality's probably an outside chance because the problem with Vitality is they tend to win out of the blue. They even can beat the best teams, but just only every now and then. So I agree. Fnatic has a chance, but realistically, the top teams in LEC are really good now. I think this playoffs looks amazing.
I feel like it's the strongest, at least since I've played here. It definitely feels like it's the strongest. Like even
Yes.
the fifth team that plays Fnatic, they're also like way stronger than fifth teams in the past. I feel like.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
So
I mean, as I just said there, like, if people don't know, even though Vitality didn't win that many games in the split, they beat all three of the top teams. They beat G2, they beat fucking Rogue, and they beat Mad Lions. They beat all of them. But the problem is that that's how inconsistent they are. They can beat them and then lose every fucking game to like fucking Astralis or something stupid, you know, like they can lose to anyone as well in the league. That's the bizarre. They went 0-2 against XL if people don't know. Like that team's all over the place. By the way, when you actually scrim against Vitality, are they like in scrims how they are in the LEC games? Where like I would describe them as like, you know, people try to make out, like we said with the Rogue time, like your team's the fragile one, like they're winning until they're not. Like no, Rogue wins the majority of the games because they're just a better team, and sometimes they make a bad decision, lose a game. The Vitality one, they are the most fragile team I have ever seen with skilled players. Like they are like the definition of a glass cannon. They can literally in the early game they can look super sick, and they have the champions obviously on like self-made and leader to get kills. But they can also just instantly just lose the whole game and have zero chance to win. Like I've never seen a team like this good and this bad almost in the same team. What do you think of this Vitality squad? Are they actually like that in scrims that we are?
That's very expected, right, from this team. Like when you saw this team, it was really like that. I mean, it can be what everything can happen. Like the ball is round and everything can happen. And in scrims, we haven't scrimmed them that much actually. So, but they're not like complete apes in scrims or anything. Like they're not like complete coin flip and they just run around fighting all the time.
Complete apes in script.
Yeah, I mean,
that was the
highest compliment.
They're not like batshit crazy in scrims. I think they're.
We'll just add that to Vitality subtitles. Vitality, not complete apes. who are complete apes, by the way? Now that we have that.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, in the past there were a lot of like complete apes. I can promise that. But at this point, there's not like that many. Like people are pretty serious in scrims. Actually, I feel like there's not like that much weird shit happening. But
that
in the
sounds
past,
like an improvement then, dude. Because wasn't it always supposedly the story that like G2 used to just dick around in scrims half the time, and you could never tell?
That was for sure meme. I felt like G2 was at least in the past they were very like good in scrims, and they were they're not taking around too much. But there were other teams that were definitely fucking around a lot in scrims, and it was very weird the way they played. But obviously, this like fucking around in scrims, it won't be efficient in the long term, or like it won't. Like if you do this for a long time, it's gonna fuck you over really hard. It's gonna bite you. So all these teams, it obviously went bad for them after a while. So yeah. Wait, you asked me a question about something.
That was just about how they played in scrims. You already answered it, mate. Sorry.
Oh, okay, nice.
This is basically like what we expected from Vitality coming into this split, though. I think, though, what were your expectations? Because for me, I was really excited about this roster because I thought they would create fun games for me to watch. I'm unlike you. I'm actually very excited about the Fnatic and Vitality series because I think it's just going to be crazy and will be really entertaining to watch, even if it's not. Neither of these teams really, I think, has the ability to make it through this entire like losers bracket gauntlet and actually win the entire thing. Also, I think both maybe Fnatic can squeak into Worlds just barely if they get super lucky. But
what do you think of Rogue games, Monte? Are they fun? Do you enjoy them?
I do. Well, I enjoy them more than I did last year. That's for sure.
Rotations, right? Rotations. Very good at rotations.
Exactly. You are, well, until you're not in the mid game sometimes. Like the Vitality game hurt me a little bit to watch you guys. But I did have fun watching the Vitality game because, again, Vitality makes situations fun to watch. So, but I think
it was mostly about us. I think it was mostly about us. But sure.
It's true. You did overpress your advantage there.
Yeah,
the win could have been much cleaner with that cannon that was very far ahead, you have to say. Yeah. You didn't have to let leader back into the game on the Akali and make plays on you as you overdove turrets over and over and over again.
Yeah, actually, I mean, leader got like two 1K gold shutdowns before that match. I think he got like, both me and Oda had like 900 G shutdowns, or was it inspired? Someone had like me, and he got like 2K gold just by 2 kills. Yeah.
But I mean, this is what I expected from Vitality, which is like hopefully an edge case playoff team that goes balls deep, man. Like they're not afraid, which makes them entertaining. But I don't think they have a shot to win, but I think they've achieved their expectations with the roster changes that they made. It's just a matter of building on that right now. And I think for Vitality, we know that coming into this year, they were trying to spend big money on a roster and it didn't come together. So I think that given the roster that they had, that they managed to scrape together, these are huge upgrades for them. And at least it gives them some level of foundation to build upon in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expected them to go to playoffs with this roster. So it's not like completely going over expectations, because until Excel made the roster changes, Vitality should have been the 6th team. But now that after Excel made the roster changes, I actually felt like Excel should have reached playoffs. I feel quite bad for them because we trolled them very hard, and also at the start of the split, they were not with the roster they should have been with. So I think, I mean, for me, Excel is a better team than Vitality. But I would
agree with that. They're more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, playing against Excel, actually, they were a good team. Definitely felt like they had a lot of good play and just solid play. They knew how to play the game very well. But it sucks for them that they got trolled with wrong roster.
They just made the lineup change too late. Yeah, exactly. Like if they'd have done that from the beginning, it would be a very interesting story, I'm pretty sure. Here's my problem. It's not, I don't even dislike Fnatic, the team, but I do think out of the teams in the playoffs, the 3 I mentioned are the most obvious ones to make Worlds. Rogue, G2, Mad Lions. Because if I think about each team, like I'm trying to think of what the theme is when I've watched them play. And those 3 teams all have a quality that could make them win LEC or go to Worlds. Like if I look at Misfits, like, they certainly have some very skilled players, super experienced players as well. This lineup's never existed as a core. I also lose games here, there, and the other, so I have no idea if they can win best of 5 series. That's a big if for me. Fnatic, like, I think their bot lane's amazing. The rest of the map's like, it's good or it's pretty good, but again, I don't know that they'll hold up in a full best of 5. And like I said about Vitality, I actually don't think the worst thing about Vitality is this: they should probably win a few more games if they wanted to actually really live up to the idea of how skilled they are. Like everyone's going on about the skill of the players. Like in theory, yeah, but it doesn't come out to show in the actual game a lot of the time. Like as I say, even when they have leads, they just throw them in. Like there's a throws where it's like, I don't even think they know what they're doing when they throw the game. I don't think they even did it. Oh, an accident. It's like they don't seem to have any clue what they're doing in the mid game, mate. Like that looks like one of the worst shot. Yeah, it looked like one of the worst shot calling teams I've seen in years, mate.
I mean, they have a lot of talent, but I don't know. League is such a team game. Like, I mean, it's kind of a meme or something because it gets said a lot. Like, it's a team game, but it really is a team game. You need to do plays together, and if you do plays alone, it's like solo queue. It's gonna be very hard, even if the most talented players. It's like. What Fnatic changed a lot, I think, from spring to summer is that they actually do a lot of plays together. Like they in together and they don't do a lot of solo plays, and they just do like things together. And it's such a powerful thing. I feel like in League, you don't need to be like super skilled, but as long as you do everything together, it becomes a lot easier. And maybe that's like Vitality problem. They have a lot of individuals and not like a team.
Indeed.
Yeah, it just feels like their ability. They can make the comeback plays because they can capitalize on over aggression through winning on individual skirmishes, but they don't seem super knowledgeable in terms of their shot calling when it comes to actually executing set plays on the map, which I think Fnatic has been much better about doing that overall.
Also, not the best time, by the way, to have a lineup that's like, it's all super skilled. It's like, have you actually seen the Rogue and G2 lineups, mate? They've got that and the other shit. You've only got that, like, and on paper you're still losing on that one anyway, I
mean, that's not expected. It's their first split together, so
yeah, that's true.
We played like so many splits together. I mean, I played with Inspired for like almost 3 years, I think, since 2019, started 2019. So.
Speaking of which, I've got a question for you, right? So here's the thing. I was talking earlier in the break. It'll be different in this VOD because how we had to do it live. But when me and Monty did the section where me and him just talking, in the past we used to have a guest awkwardly sit there, but now we allow you to have a fucking drink and a Coke or whatever, right? When we were doing that section, I was talking about how sad it is that like Rookie will probably retire and he only got to win 1 Worlds. He never won an MSI. And like his actual resume is going to be a lot lighter than you'd hope for. You're in the same position, my dude, because what I was talking about is the concept of the window. It's how long your team is good enough that you have the chance to win. You're now on your 3rd split in a row where no team has won more games than your team in the regular split. So this will be the 3rd split. That's absolutely a fact. Go and look it up.
Last split, in spring split, we came second, no? We came second. But
with the same number of fucking wins. You use your brain. I just said, like, listen, the words
I
are
mean,
important.
You said we had more wins. I think you said we had more wins.
Listen, Larsson. First of all, I'm ginger, but I'm better than you. So if people go back in the board, I said no team has won more games than you. That's called lawyered. Shut the fuck up, right?
Okay,
so that's the superior ginger. No team has won more, and especially over the last 3 splits, because you've been first or second tied for first, but on a tiebreaker for the last 3 splits. But here's the point I'm making: is if you can come essentially first or tied for first in 3 splits in a row, on paper it means you could win all 3 splits. So since you didn't get this, like, listen, you were very close last split, to be fair, but you didn't get the win that one. Obviously the summer one last year was disappointing the way the playoffs went. This split, like, it has to be it, right? You have to win this time. Like, the window's there for you to be a champion, right? Because, you know, like you were saying before about Vitality, everyone else can say stuff when it's their first split. You can go, well, you know, we're new to it, we're inexperienced. There's the 3rd split in a row. It's time to win, right?
Right. I agree with you, Thorin. You're a genius. And I definitely agree. I mean, in summer last year, I don't think like we were bound to win. I felt like we were still not that good. But in spring split, we definitely should have won. I mean, now we should definitely win, right? But just to take every best of 5 step by step. I shouldn't get too ahead of myself and think about like a trophy. Because I know if we play our game, I think we will stomp everyone. Because I feel like we're definitely better than everyone else. If we
you ever do that though, like, do you try to have goals set in mind or anything? Or, you know, I mean, people remember, fans don't know what it's like to be a pro. They don't know if it's like a movie and you're looking at a fucking vision board, or you're thinking about like the coach that died when he was 7, who was like, you gotta win the LEC last. Like, no one knows what it's like to be a pro. So do you actually try to have set goals in your mind? Do you do what you say, just take it with every match?
Yeah,
what do you do?
Yeah, sometimes I try to set goals when I feel like I need to pressure myself a bit more. But sometimes I also try to like take a step away from this, like set goals, like winning LEC, because I feel like I'm pressuring myself a bit too much, and I need to take like a bit of pressure off myself and just enjoy the game. Because if you feel like way too much pressure on yourself, that I need to win LEC, then you might choke, for example.
True.
But sometimes you like need the extra motivation to like maybe just have like the LEC trophy on your computer screen every time you wake up, or a picture on your wall in your room that it's a LEC trophy, like that's your goal.
Yes.
I mean, definitely. I mean, my goal is definitely to win LEC. I have that goal right now, and like to stomp playoffs. I want to show that we're like 1 step above or 2 steps above everyone else. That's definitely my goal. And I want to show like confidence gameplay, very confident gameplay in playoffs. That we're, that's very confident gameplay.
Yeah, great. Monty, I've got a quick anecdote for you, actually. Since he referenced there, what you could do is you could have the LEC, you know, trophy on your screen to remind you. I don't know if people know this, but this isn't a joke. It's real, right? Flusher in CSGO, because at one point in time, he was the guy who had the most major trophies. He'd won 3 majors. Obviously, Astralis has won 4 now, but he'd won 3, right? No joke. When they used to, you know, before like a match starts in Counter-Strike at a LAN, they always show like down the line of the players, and they're all warming up, or they're all like, you know, talking and stuff. And they, over the top, the broadcast talent's talking about, you know, and then of course they're going to play this game later on or whatever, right? When they would do this, right, whenever they would show Flusher's computer, this is real, he made his warm-up routine. He would just go inside the game and he would just one by one look at the 3 major trophies he's won, which in CS it's like, you know, like an item, so it's like you like spinning and rotate. He would just look at those, trolling people as though that's how he warms up in the game, just looking at all the, like, because he'd won 3 as well, which is like, that is gangsters, fuck, I can't lie. Like, that's how you truly troll someone, you have to understand. Because what people don't understand is that, right, is if people don't like you, Larsson, I'll give you a little tip here, mate, you lean into it, you become a villain. So like, for example, if people don't know, a lot of people were worried that Flusher had actually really cheated in the game, and that the cheat was, you know, like his excuse was that he lifted the mouse, but everyone worried that really he'd used an aimbot, right? So he just leaned into it and kept like calling himself like fucking Sir Lifts a lot or whatever, or like fucking making jokes all the time about how he's going to lift them out. Like, dude, he just leaned into it like a motherfucker. Became the ultimate villain. That's the way you do it.
Like G2.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's where they sort of.
I mean, that's what they did a lot in the memes and stuff.
For sure.
So
yeah.
It's very, very broken strategy, for sure.
Exactly. Like, if I were you, I'm not joking. Last year, like you said, when it was like the more one-dimensional Rogue, I would have leaned into that. If like some opponent complains, like, all they do is play boring Oriana and just win on skill, and I'd be like, yeah, and I'd tell you what, I'm going to fucking stomp you on Oriana, bitch. Like, do something about it. Yeah, that's the best mid laner in the fucking history of the game. What do you want? What am I supposed to take a different champion and lose? Now sit the fuck down. That's what I do. I just lean into it. I'll write you some lines. Listen, we'll get in contact. I'll start a little writing room. We'll send you some things to say before the games. It's all right.
Okay, I have a question. I have a question for you. Are we winning playoffs? Is Rogue winning?
Right, here's the problem. that might be the question that you didn't want to ask. Because here's the bad part, mate.
Ooh.
Is of the 3 teams I have that could be the champion, I've said it could be you, could be G2, could be Mad Lions. Right, here's the problem. So for me, I divide the 3 like this. On paper, your team does have the best chance. Like I said, almost every game I've watched you play this split, there might be one game where you weren't winning at some point in it and probably should have won the game. Like, you actually really could have gone almost undefeated. Then secondly, G2, I think, really did get their shit together like the last 2 weeks. It got way better. And they obviously have an amazing roster. So like, it's hard to look past them. Like, they obviously have the experience. But then again, I do feel like people are way too quick to be like, oh, they're back. G2's back. It's like, they're still not the fucking Perks team.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, last split, they were like, they came first in the split. And
yeah.
And they were still like quite weak in playoffs. So
they had some problems, yeah.
It's like you
so
can't
to me,
yeah.
So it's not certain they will. The reason I find Mad Lions very interesting is I think Mad Lions is the modern like inheritor of that G2 quality with Perks, where they used to just be able to come back in every fucking game. Like they've done it, as you said, they've done it against you a bunch of times, mate. Like I don't know how this is the team that can start the game with like a okay draft, not even have winning lanes, and then some point in the mid game, it's like they just flip a switch and just start making plays that work. Like I don't know how they do it myself, mate. So the problem is, I feel
so much. So it's the comfort zone, I guess. I don't know.
No, by the way, it can't be a mistake, as you said. If you do it that often, it must be legit. Like even though I can't figure out how they're doing it, they obviously it's some strength of theirs. The problem I have is this, mate. Even though people think I'm just going off the spring final, that essentially means thematically that is kind of the counter to your team's strength. Is if a team basically never thinks they're out of the game and is really good in the mid game and coming back, that will give you a chance to win against Rogue. So, like my heart says Rogue wins it, but I don't know. I feel like there's a world where maybe you choke to Mad Lions again.
I think we're throwing enough games for it. I think we're throwing enough games.
Okay.
We can't really throw more games. I feel like it's not possible.
Famous last words.
I can promise you. I can promise you that we won't throw against Mad again. Because I'll make sure that it doesn't happen.
Because here's the problem. The way that the series in spring went against G2, that's the Rogue I want to see, dude. That Rogue would win the LEC.
Yeah, I mean, our pros against Mad, I think they're kind of choked. Like, it's kind of choked. They're pros against Mad. It's definitely kind of choked. And if we are way more confident and we just know everything that's going on, and I think we need to be way more confident. And I feel like we are definitely getting there. And like those silly mistakes, I think we're getting way more aware of those silly mistakes that happens. So if those silly mistakes doesn't happen, there is not going to be for them to come back.
All I'll say is this, right? So if people know in the past, I've made the comparison because it was actually our veteran introduced me to who you were as a player. He said that here was his analogy. He said if Leader's going to be like the next Caps, then Larsson is the next Frog, and he's like the master control mage player. He plays like a conservative smart, blah, blah, blah. Right? When he said that, right, I actually had a tweet written out. This is real. This tweet was written out because if people know there's a tweet everyone tried to meme on me where I was like, I can't believe Larsson's going to win the LEC before Nemesis. This was during game 3. I had another tweet, and the tweet said, and it said something like, just like Froggen was the only one who broke the Fnatic hegemony because they'd won LEC all the times before Froggen's alliance. I said, now the theme will continue because Larsson will break the G2 hegemony. Right? I had to put that in the drafts during game 3 because it was looking so much like you're going to win. And I thought, you know what's in the drafts? We'll wait. And then I remember in game 5, just sadly just deleting the fucking tweet when you guys just blew the whole game. Like, well, fucking all right. Well, delete that tweet. That could have been a banger, but put that on the trash heap then. So
maybe we can recycle it. Maybe we can recycle it for summer.
I can bring that back. Oh, I'm saying I was believing. I wasn't a fucking non-believer, mate. But you know.
Yeah, I mean, if we're 2 up, and then we have Nash in the third game, and we're like super ahead, then I understand that you believe.
Exactly.
But yeah, I hope you save the tweet so you can make it again.
We can do it again. We can run it back.
Yeah.
If you win this one.
I do think it's a tough call though, because if you look at as you mentioned at the start, Larsson, G2 has been on this tear. They won all their games in the last couple of weeks. And Mad Lions, even though they did lose to G2 this last week, I think Mad Lions, if you're coming into Super Week, right, and your 3 games are G2, Fnatic, and Misfits, so you're playing 3 other playoff teams, and you have the limited amount of time that you have in Super Weeks to prep for these teams, it's very impressive. Like their strength of schedule was incredibly difficult for the Super Week. And they still went 2-1 overall. Yeah. So I think they're coming up at the right time. I would say, a little bit more disappointed with some of Mad Lions' performances earlier on in this split. But there's also the fact that they were coming off of MSI. You know, the MSI hangover is real because of the extremely limited amount of time that you have between the end of MSI to adjust to the new patch. And also you're kind of like burnt out after swimming so hard.
I mean, this MSI thing is so it's disgusting. I feel like how we can have like play for 5 months straight and then have 1 week off where you're home and then you need to go back to playing again. I mean, it must be really hard, and it's obviously very understandable that they were like chilling at start to split, kind of not playing too much solo queue and stuff.
By the way, Monty, what do you actually think?
Kind of a nerf, this MSI thing. Like going to MSI, I feel like it's a nerf.
And here's,
unless you win the whole thing, and then it's like, oh shit, okay, it was very worth going here. But
and here's the thing, Larsson, they only had to fly from Berlin to Iceland. They had it the easiest, right, out of anybody, and it was still shit. It was still shit.
Monty, what do you think about? Yeah, go on.
China traveled far, but they had a private jet, so at least they had a private jet.
What do you actually think, Monty, about Mad Lions, though? Because as Larson said there, by the way, I'm definitely not saying they're lucky. Like, just because I don't know how they come back. They've done it too many times, mate. It can't be luck. In fact, when I see a team come back that many times, Monty, what it usually says to me is, individually, the players probably aren't at the best form, but they must be fucking well coached. They look like the team that know what they're doing in the game.
Yeah, and I think that Mad Lions is in a position, like Humanoid has been playing extremely well overall this year, and I think that the Elyoya story is pretty underrated overall because it's been very rare that I've seen a player come in with this much poise in terms of not being rattled mentally by what's going on within a game, not being rattled mentally by being in very high-stress playoff situations. From day one, he started making extremely aggressive, smart plays in terms of tower diving that I think a lot of players wouldn't be so bold as to attempt right off the bat. So he's been really impressive, and I think that it's telling that when we've spoken to the Mad Lions players, that they've said that the reason why they wanted to make this change out of the jungle was that they wanted a more proactive voice on the team. It wasn't about Shadow's, individual abilities. It was the fact that Elyoya really directs and provides the shot calling in the early game that they needed. So the fact that this is coming out of a player in just his second split and that he managed to win in his first split is one of the most phenomenal rookie performances that I've seen in professional League of Legends, because it's not only his individual ability, it's not only his playmaking ability, it's not only his coordination with his teammates, it's the fact that he had to step up and be the leader in the early game. That is a huge, huge burden to put on a rookie player, and he just continues to deliver. So I think he's been sensational, and I think Mad Lions as an org is not only very well coached, but they know the pieces that they need from a management perspective in order to slot in to make them better. Because we talked about this coming in from last year. It's very bold for Mad Lions, a team that took second place in last year, to make major roster changes for rookies and not just try and run back the same roster and say, oh, we'll get first place this time. It's like they make the adjustments that are necessary. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Mad Lion's strategy was to take it easy after MSI very intentionally, with the idea that they were going to ramp up their practice later on in the split. And they've put together some really impressive wins. So I think this team is extremely good. And I do feel that it's kind of a toss-up between you guys on Rogue and Mad Lions and G2, because Mad Lions and G2 have gotten better. You guys are still good. You've been good the entire time. I think the only team that has gotten worse in this playoffs is really like Misfits to a certain degree, but Fnatic has gotten a little bit worse, I would say, overall. But it's going to be tough to see who comes out on top in this one. The plus side is you only have to win. My question to you about your motivation is like, yeah, I know you want to win LEC, but you actually only have to win this one best of 5 versus Misfits to make Worlds. So there's a pretty good consolation prize as long as you could win one best of 5.
I mean, going to Worlds by beating Misfits won't be like a nice thing, honestly. I won't be like happy by beating Misfits and then like losing to best of 5s against Mad and G2. Then I would like rather not go to Worlds, because then we're not good enough. It's like useless to go to Worlds if you're not going to be a very strong team there, I feel like. I mean, that might be a weird statement to people, but I mean, that's what happened last year. We went to Worlds and we weren't good enough, and it was not even a nice experience. So if we go to Worlds, I want to make sure that we're a very strong team. And to me, we're a very strong team, and even my goal is now to win Worlds, and that's like something I've never said before, because it has been like very out of the reach, I feel like. But now we have like such a strong team, and if we just play with confidence and make sure these small mistakes that makes us throw the game doesn't happen, then I think we will be super, super strong, and it will be very hard for the other LEC teams, and even internationally, it will be very interesting to see how we stack up.
By the way, on the whole like El Yoya topic, Monty, there's another thing I think is like radically changed about LEC that's very like a positive sign is look how fucking deep the jungle position is right now in LEC.
Yeah.
Like you have got like dude, two of the MVP candidates would be Inspired and Razork. There's two.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you've got El Yoya and Yag, because we haven't even mentioned. And by the way, who have we got in the other players? We've got the Marcoon guy. Who did you say?
Jungle is broken. That's all.
Jungle is broken. Good way. You've got the Marcoon.
And pretty unskilled. Also
depends on the position.
Wow.
I mean, Bripo rolls off
Alright.
jungle, and he's a very good jungler. Treats rolls off jungle, and he actually plays well in jungle. So there's something weird going on, right?
So you'll have to expect. What do you think are the most broken parts of the jungle right now? Before Thorin wraps up his point, because I mean,
I actually don't think jungle is that broken. But I mean, the thing about jungle is that you're like not that much in threat. Like you will like do your ganks, and then you will like look good because you're not a laner who can like get ganked and die or something. You're just like farming your jungle, and then you'll be the one making them play, and then you'll be the one like getting the kills or like assists, and it's like harder to die. I feel like, I mean, at least in early game, in mid game, it's usually easier to die as jungler because you're not that strong.
That's how you know he's a fucking mid laner. He actually attempted to use the logic that like can't get ganked if you're the fucking jungler.
I mean, it's true. It's
it's technically true. I can't lie.
You can low-key get ganked if enemy team has priors and then invades you. Then you get pretty fucked, and that sucks for the jungler. If you don't have priors and then enemy jungler invades you. So that can happen. That's like equivalent to getting ganked.
You could just be Spicker going to the literal world championship, playing against teams from Korea and China, while your mid laner, while you're on fucking Nidalee, plays stuff like Zillion mid lane, and you will just never ever have priority or a chance to even play the game. So, you know, sometimes it can be easy with the jungler, sometimes it can be a nightmare simulator. You know, it depends who you are.
Why are you flaming Beardson?
It's not a very good coach, is he? Not a very good coach. Technically, his team's in first place. So I can't deny that.
How do you know about that? I think coaching, you can't say he's not a good coach. It's impossible to say.
I just can't know what I'm talking
about. Like all this coach awards and stuff. It's like how can you even give coach award?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
It's like how can you even give coach award? Like you can't see anything from what happens in the team.
Well, you know what, Larsson, this actually leads to an interesting topic because I have to say, I'm not joking. I guarantee your coach would be talked about a lot more if he came on talk shows. The problem is because he doesn't do very much media, people forget he even exists, even though, as I said, your team has been either first or tied for first, like 3 splits in a row with the same coach. So no one ever brings up Freddie.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. I mean, his branding sucks. Like, he's branding noob, that's for sure.
Sucks. Yeah, it's true. But we tried to invite him on this show, and he said he doesn't do shows. So, you know. I mean,
it's a bit too cool. He's very cool, so he doesn't want to be here. It's, like, super cool.
Okay.
He did an interview on stage the other day, and so if you want to see Freddie, he did an interview on stage, and yeah.
Well, I think it just sucks because with Freddie, it's clear that he is doing a lot because as we discussed with you, your own performance, but also with Rogue's performance, your style has changed a lot and your macro play has been super clean. So it seems to me that he probably does a lot of good work for your team overall. How do you think Freddie contributes overall to Rogue, and what do you think his biggest strengths are? I
mean, Freddie's definitely a very good coach. I didn't realize at start like how he was as a coach, but I realized like the ways he works now and like I see the good things he does. Like he definitely made us play a lot more early game into the Nitrous Hammer split. I mean, when I was called Frogan, which is understandable because I was kind of like Frogan. He made me change my playstyle a lot. He definitely wanted a lot more early game, and that's something that we have been struggling, like fighting against each other. Like I've been the late game guy, and he's been the early game guy in drafts because usually I'm very involved in drafts. And I would fight him a lot. I remember there was a Sona Taric thing with Woolite and Vander. Me and Freddy were discussing for 3-4 hours about if you should first pick Sona Taric, because no other team was doing it, but I was like, just first pick Sona Taric, it's so broken. Because I was like a very scaling guy, but he was like, no, it doesn't give prio, because he loves prios, and that's what you kind of see in our gameplay now, we have a lot of prio.
Yep.
So that's where it comes from, like it comes from Freddy, because he likes prio a lot. And that's what he does a lot, to make sure that we have tools to like get ahead in the games. Because there's times where you would not have tools to get ahead, and then it feels very impossible to play against good teams like G2 and Mad. Like they will just snowball on you if you don't have tools to get ahead, or like stay even at least.
It feels almost.
He gives a lot of structure to our practice and like make sure we're on like a right path, like that we don't like become stupid and like start playing really weird stuff that is not gonna work in LEC.
It feels almost perfect in a way because if he loves the prio, he's almost fighting against you guys who want to play for this late game scaling, which is always something I feel it's a comfort for you guys that you can fall back on, but in a way, he's forced a new dimension for your team.
Yeah, but we have also met in the middle. I feel like he has come a bit more to a bit more late game, and I've come a lot to his early game. I've come a lot to his more prio style, and yeah, we have met a bit in the middle.
Now you just need a coach that knows the mid game. Then it's just you'll be unbeatable. Then you know.
This issue, like 20 to 30 minutes, Freddy has no fucking clue what to do. So
there you go.
Just blame him. Blame him.
And you're just waiting for the skill to kick in. So you know.
I think we need to get a Chinese coach like Nelson or someone, and then we're set.
So overall at Rogue, like you guys are very well supported, which I think has been a huge part of your success. Are there any other people on the coaching staff that have helped you out in particular, or other individuals within the Rogue organization that you feel has helped you dimensionalize your style?
Yeah, I mean, we have the assistant coach Bloomy, and then we have the analyst Nico that help a lot. But especially Isma, our performance coach, is very, very useful to me. It's like a sports psychologist, right? And it's been super useful to me. And I mean, everything he does outside of game, like to make sure that we live a healthy life and efficient practice, and all from the mental struggles, because obviously as a league player, you will have a lot of mental struggles. Maybe not all people, and some people will have more than others, but there will be a lot of mental struggles because playing league all day can be, it can be a journey. And when I think league teams in general, I think players are not very much team players, or they're not very experienced in like team cultures and how you should behave as a team. There's a lot of like individuals, and people try to blame each other and like put blame on each other. That's been like a big issue in like I think esports and all my previous teams and all my teams. So it's like super helpful in all those regards. And especially now in Summer Split, I struggle a bit at start of Summer Split, but he like helped me a lot. We discussed a lot of things like pre-game routines and how to change some of my habits, and especially like my pre-game routines have made me super confident. And yeah, without him, I wouldn't be the same player. That's for sure.
You mentioned earlier about the MSI hangover, and you're talking about kind of the brutal schedule right now. One thing we were discussing earlier with Crumbz was the fact that, you know, going to Worlds is such an enormous commitment for players, because you have most of the time you have to travel to a different continent. You're there for months, especially if you end up playing in play-ins or going.
Now there's quarantine as well, which makes everything worse.
Yeah, and now there's quarantine as well. So, you know, when you're looking at your year and you say, well, I wouldn't want to go to Worlds if I went in third place, for example. Is that because like it just feels like it's not worth it as a player to go if you're just going to bomb out in groups because of the level of commitment that it takes and the amount of time? Because as we said, you know, if you're done with playoffs, if you're one of the bottom 4 teams in the LEC, you played from like January, February till now, and then you're just done. Whereas if you go to MSI, you don't get a break, you get a week off, like you said. And then if you go to Worlds, you're there potentially until November, which is really tough. How is this as a player, and would you like to see any changes made?
I mean, I think it's hard to make changes. I haven't thought about it, like in which way they can make changes, but I think if you're a very good team, then you will be happy like playing until November. I wouldn't mind it. Like if you're a very good team, we'll be very happy playing until November. Like I'm playing on a Worlds fan or something, it's obviously super worth it. But if you're a team that you spend like 2-3 months at Worlds, or like instead of something else, like you spend 2-3 months and you're like a bad team and you have a shit scrim results, you get stomped, you have bad team environment, then it's not really worth the time. Then it's not like a good time. It's last year was a bit like this. It was quite hard, and it doesn't feel worth it. But even if we place third and we are like a good team, then it will be feel worth. But let's say we do like really bad best of 5s, which I don't think will happen. But let's say it happens like to another other team, then it feels bad to go to Worlds to just get stomped in groups. Like spend so much time to just get stomped in groups and then just go home. Yeah. You guys have opinions? Foreign opinions?
Like you also did get like basically a group that was impossible. Like if people don't remember, he had the group that had fucking Damwon and Jingdong, and at the time Jingdong also would like could have been.
I don't think it matters. I think you would never get out of that group we had, we won't get out. I think with the way we played.
Okay. That doesn't help though.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't help, but it's not like, I mean, people overhyped this group a little bit. I'm a very strong group, but I think like JGG weren't that strong. Like I felt like they were like the third best Chinese team. I mean, Suning were definitely better, which they went to finals, so obviously they were better. So it was a bit over. I mean, it was definitely a very hard group, but it was not like super impossible. I think if we played on a good level, we would have very good chances to beat JDG.
Do you think
but not that one very crazy.
Do you think it'll be easier this year if you go to Worlds because you were already in China last year, so you kind of know what to expect, and probably the circumstances will be better this year given that the pandemic is no longer as severe, even though you probably will have to go through the quarantine again?
Yeah, I mean, I must say this, that even though last year's Worlds was like, it didn't feel worth, I mean, we learned a lot from Worlds. Like, even though we got stumped, we actually learned a lot on how to play the game and like how to behave as a team and how to approach things outside of the game. And especially, we learned a lot like how to play the game. That's why we had a very different style in spring than we had the year before that. And we were really eager to play a different style. And we definitely learned a lot. Actually, you asked the question. What was it?
No, it's just like because you were already in China and having this experience, and because it's going to be in China again, do you feel like more ready to go to Worlds? Like it'll be a lot easier this time.
Yeah, I feel a lot more ready. Like I know how everything works, and we're definitely a way better team this time, and we can stand up. I think very, very good against these Asian teams, or that's what I think. Definitely.
Do you think you had to address the priority issue in order to be competitive internationally? Because it's so hard to stop. Like in League of Legends, if a team is really good at snowballing, it's very hard to stop them from doing that if they do get early game priority. Do you think that was like the biggest flaw last year, where you were able to kind of play a little bit more passively or patiently or wait around to scale, where that's a lot harder to do at international competition than it is domestically at the LEC?
For sure. It's so hard to play the style we did against these teams. It feels impossible to play. You don't get to do any play. They dictate everything that's going on, and you can go with this style that, we will outscale. We can be 7Q goal behind and still outscale, but it doesn't work like that in the game. It really doesn't. If enemy team keeps snowballing well, you're not going to have a chance. But if they fuck up, like we did against Mad Lions, for example, then it can happen that this style works. But it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work. It shouldn't work.
It's just less reliable.
Yeah,
I would say.
Like Damo will not throw a 7K goal lead at 20 minutes. So maybe now, I'm not sure how good they are now, but back then, yeah.
They're not great right now.
Yeah, they're not that great right now. So.
If anything, like even though it seems like it'll be harder to win against the LPL, LCK seems a lot more beatable this year than compared to last year. And things are not looking awesome going into the playoffs for LCK overall. Yeah,
it looked really weird when I was looking at standings, like the strength of the teams. I don't watch LCK actually, so I think you guys have a way better opinion on this. I only watch LPL because the playstyle is way better to take away from, because like how fast they're way. That's true. There's better teams.
Which mid laner do you like watching the most?
I don't have a specific mid laner. I usually just watch the macro of LPL teams because I think that's what we need to improve the most.
Okay.
I usually just try to watch the way they play the map, because obviously that's where we lack in 20 to 30 minute mark, and that's why I try to watch a lot how they set up in barons and how they play to get towers, for example. That's kind of what I'm looking at a lot. I don't think there's any like mid laner in the world that's like insanely good. There are a lot of really good mid laners, but there's no like insane mid laner.
Is that just in an absolute sense or relative to you? Like, for example, you're telling me if you watch like Knight play, you're just like, it's no biggie. He's all right, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, it's not like he's all right. It's definitely very good, but
not insane though.
I definitely think I can beat him and everyone else.
Okay.
I mean, I felt at last words that they weren't as skilled as I thought they would be, even though they were stomping us, kinda. They were definitely kind of stomping us. I feel like individual level they weren't that much better. They just knew how to play the game way better.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for us with you, Larsson, today. We do have to do some viewer Q&A, but thank you very much for joining us, and good luck in the playoffs. I'm very confident you'll do well against Misfits in the first round. So we're anticipating.
I'm very confident that we'll do well whole playoffs.
All right,
and
there you go.
I'm looking forward to Thorin's tweet after win. I hope it's a banger.
Very good.
There you go.
Very good. Well, thanks for joining us, Larsson. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes, guys, and we'll do some viewer Q&A. All right, we're here with some viewer Q&A from our Grog Coin holders in our Discord. You can look for the Discord link below, type Discord and Twitch chat. If you hold 5 grog coins or 25 grog coins, you can ask questions and we'll answer them. Even though we did not do that, I forgot on the last episode of the Four Horsemen because we were very busy with a super serious topic. So we'll get to the questions today. So we'll start off with one from Crazy Leprechaun. As essentially every Q&A you've gotten one around literature, have you thought of starting an esports book club? Moses and Maniac brought this up on Twitter, and I'm curious who you would invite as well. The answer is yes. You want to describe it, Thorin?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, I wouldn't do it as an actual real book club. Like, if people don't know, what you tend to do in a book club is you actually literally pick a book, and it's a way to make people who otherwise like can't discipline themselves to read a book each week because you have to go to the book club and discuss that chapter. So, like, that's the reason, by the way, that I was the premise behind how Maniac and Moses were talking about. Like, Maniac made a comment that was like, you know, I almost never read books, but it sort of like thrills me when I do. So, like, how do I do it more? And Moses was like, we should start a book club. So basically, we would do it, but the premise for us would be more like, it'd be a content series where each episode would be one book, and you'd have people who'd already read the book, and you just discuss themes around it, tie it into whatever your own reinterpretations of the book are, etc. So basically, the reason why we would do it is, one, as you've identified, it's in our wheelhouse, and two, as you've probably also noticed, people don't just watch our content to hear like analytical stuff what they give. They watch because of our personalities and who we are and the rapport and all that. So a lot of that would obviously cross over. And as you say, if you look at the fans, it's the same with my AMA as I do for Patreon. Probably like a third of the questions now are stuff like, what music do you like? What books do you like?
Stuff.
Yeah, people are more interested. So I think it's actually all lines seem to be going this way anyway. So yeah, I'm almost certain, again, we can't reveal what the source will be, but there will be some business things in the future months where we might have a platform to do this from. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, and what we've talked about specifically on this topic too is doing one around graphic novels, because you have been into graphic novels a lot longer than I have, Thorin, and you've given me many graphic novels, so I've been getting into it myself. But there's a lot of overlap between like esports and other interests. Like there's a lot of people who are into esports who are into graphic novels or anime or, specific TV shows like Game of Thrones. And so because there's such a huge overlap, there's a lot of interest around that kind of content and discussing it. And I think one of the fun things is that even if you're not into graphic novels, I think there are a lot of people that if we were to do a series on graphic novels where, we talk about kind of a tour through the graphic novel classics, and we can get some of the writers or artists on potentially, which I think would actually be quite easy, weirdly. These people are pretty accessible, it seems like. Then there would be a really good chance to talk about where it lands in graphic novel history and give people an opportunity to kind of enter the medium for the first time, which I think would be cool. And I mean, I've been reading a lot of graphic novels recently. I just finished East of West. I'm reading Gideon Falls right now. I was reading Gideon Falls last night. So I think that in particular would be really interesting to kind of guide people who are graphic novel enthusiasts or who are wanting to get into the genre, to facilitate conversations with some of the people who are actually the writers or artists on them as well. So that would be fun, I think.
I even know like a really good topical angle you could do it from, which is, since nowadays graphic novels and comics realistically are just essentially fucking the raw materials that they mine movie franchises out of. What you would do is, when there's a relevant movie franchise coming up, you would just say, if you like that, or in fact, if you don't, here are the real comics of those characters. Like I did it myself recently on Twitter about Loki. Like, if anyone hasn't seen that TV show, spoiler, it's absolute ass cheeks. It's fucking terrible. Like, I'll give everyone a spoiler. The entire first season ends literally with a character you have never been introduced with for 10 minutes giving exposition on why he did everything as like the super secret player. It's total ass cheeks.
Deus Ex Machina, nice.
It's so unbelievably bad. Like, you can't. So as a result, what I did in my tweet was, I was basically like, if you like that character, here's a short limited series run someone did. You could just go read that book. You don't have to watch the TV show. Believe it or not, you have the choice of what inputs you put in your brain. So similarly, like if a big movie was coming out, yeah, that would be like perfect timing to have some famous person on and then go through all the best, I don't know, Batman comics or something over time,
Yeah, I think my issue though is like, I don't really read the superhero comics beyond some of the stuff that you've given me, or some of the like seminal story arcs, or like Red Sun, which is amazing that you gave me, but that's kind of like an alternate thought piece almost on Superman. But it's really hard for me to get into the superhero comics because, first off, I don't really care about the characters, and second off, I think that it's hard for me because even if they're good stories, it's like the one good story for this character that's surrounded by like decades of garbage that it's really hard for me to be invested in, if you know what I mean.
Of course.
So I prefer more of the independent approach rather than the kind of foundational superheroes. But yeah, I think in terms of movies, people would be into that because I certainly would be into that because at least I get to read some of the good stuff instead. Because I really am not a huge fan of like superhero movies or anything or the TV shows. Let's go on to the next question. What would be your esports equivalents of the Sphinx riddle? This is tied into our conversation about the infinite monkey theorem. But the catch is only TSM's fans cannot solve it. I think the question for TSM fans that is so interesting is how can you hate me and Thorin so much based off of our personality, but be a TSM fan when Reginald is the owner? How do you solve that in your mind?
You know, that was the one I never understood, dude. Like, I actually get the people who just blow Bjergsen all day long. He was a very good player. And by the way, by all accounts, had great work ethic, blah, 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 all the rest of it.
Super nice guy.
But as you say, like, the idea that you go, look, I really hate obnoxious, loudmouth fucking people who just pop up. Oh, I'm a big fan of Reginald. Like, he hasn't even got the upside of, like, being intelligent and funny and entertaining and that. He's just a fucking moron with all of the qualities you claim are assigned to us. Also, here's the problem with TSM fans is they are beyond feckless. Like, I saw some guy trying to argue you, Monty, where you made some comment about like the Activision Blizzard thing where like they do, I can't remember, it was something about like one of the further stories that came out, like you were making some point about like toxicity in the company, and I saw some moron trying to argue with you saying like, but all you do is bring negativity to the community. Like, if you actually watch all these episodes of Summoning Insight and you miss the hours of people laughing, having great conversation, and you only key in on like the one thing you think was a negative joke, and your opinion is the totality of the plus minus is we bring negative to, you're a fucking moron. You're actually objectively a moron. I know it's a subjective judgment, but the sheer amount of quantity we're talking about, you are just a cretin. Like you can't. You're basically a guy who in a movie, like your take on the movie of Batman would be, it's just a depressing story about a guy whose parents were killed. That was the first 5 minutes. What about all the rest? Like, what is it? What take is this? So yeah, basically, if I had to guess, because obviously the riddle of the Sphinx was like an epic thing that had to be like solved before like a certain pharaoh, whatever the fuck, would come like into power. The riddle of the Sphinx for TSM fans would be something like this: how, on the one hand, are you going to talk shit about being on top of NA, which you imply means you're good, which means you have to have beaten someone good, but then when you are on top of NA, you go to Worlds as the first seed and are fucking trash, which implies you either never had anything to be bragging about in the first place because you were the king of a trash heap, or you did brag and now you must acknowledge you are even more humiliated at Worlds. There's the riddle. They've never managed to solve it yet.
That's good. I like that.
Pretty good, right? It's pretty good.
And to go back to the point about toxicity too, it's like, when did that ever come up on my thousands of hours of live broadcasting of League of Legends? You know, when it's my job to hype up the teams and to be the neutral observer. The only time that I would make really harsh takes on teams would be on shows like Summoning Insight, where that's what the purpose of the show is, right? That's the place for those kind of takes. And even then, it was a huge minority of the content. And if you don't watch the content, I'm not in control of what other people clip and put on the internet.
Exactly.
You know, so it's like you saw all the negative takes because people are like, look at this hot take from Monty, but you never, it's like 10 seconds out of like a 3-hour show where the rest of it wasn't that way. And
by the way, I love it when they blur those lines though, and they act like, you know, all your career is one part. Because with me, they always do it with Twitter, obviously. But the funniest one ever is when the people who themselves weren't there at the beginning mistell the story. Because you know what I've got over my whole career? They always say, this is when you know they know nothing about Counter-Strike. They always say, Monty, and what about that time he went to an event and just flamed the home nation? Right? They genuinely think, Monty, I went to Katowice, I came on stage in front of the entire Sportic crowd and was like, you know what, Poland, that's one of the worst countries in Europe. Like, they actually believe that. That's how dumb these morons are. Even though, in doing so, they're actually explaining that the only moron in that equation is them not being able to understand a fairly simple story. It's almost like one would be more appropriate for a podcast and one wouldn't be appropriate for, like, in the actual live. Because they do the same thing with you. They act like you went on Worlds and were like, TSM's fucking trash, aren't they? Like, no! Unsurprisingly, he was a model professional when he was on the actual league broadcast, wasn't he? What the fuck? What would you want to be, though? What would the riddle of the Sphinx be for TSM fans?
That's what I said. Like the riddle would be, how do you justify hating certain people because of their bad behavior, but still support TSM, who is owned by Rengifo?
I know. It can't be resolved.
If you can't, like, choose which one it is. Either you care about people's personalities in your fandom, and if they are unlikable people, then you cannot like TSM. These things don't exist in isolation.
This way, I'll give you an example, Monty. Right? Let's just do a thought exercise, because what's going to be great about this thought exercise is it'll tell you if you're a TSM fan or not. Because if you're a TSM fan, you'll go, what's the big deal? I don't see the point. If you're not a TSM fan, it'll instantly make sense and you'll know why TSM fans are morons. So last year, during that whole Holy War thing, I revealed that at the exact time I made the tweet in like May of 2020, that year, 2020, there was a vlog still on the main TSM YouTube channel from 2012 in which Reginald said a word that almost everyone watching this broadcast would say is a slur against gay people, right? He said that and the video was still live on their channel. Here's the thought exercise. So TSM fans all told me, what's the big deal? It was years ago. Besides, I'm sure he's changed his mind. They took it down after you said it, so they obviously don't agree with it. Here's the thought exercise. If I had a video like that on my channel until last year, when Reginald pointed it out, do you think TSM fans would say the same things about me? There you go, because as I said, that is the lens right there. If you're a TSM fan, you'll never enter through that looking glass. Everyone else knows exactly the point I made. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? You know.
Exactly.
Because when they defended Monty, I was like, they'll defend literally anything. Like, you can't. I basically realised what I should have known the whole time. TSM fans are impervious to facts. No amount of facts can actually change, because let's be real, facts never made them a TSM fan, did they? Some sort of moral weakness or something, I don't know.
Exactly. All right, here's a good one. Who is the LCS and LEC coach of the split?
Let me see. Because here's the problem. It's hard for LCS because, like I said, the teams be up and down. The problem is, based on even the conversation with Larsson, I actually feel like the obvious two people are actually the coaches of the two teams that finished first and second in LEC. So, as I said, if you look at Rogue,
I think Youngbuck has a strong.
It's not terrible, but put it this way, Rogue, like, mate, if your team every game is just leading the game, like, unless they have far and away the best players in the league, your coach is doing a fucking amazing job. That means his read on the meta is always on. As we pointed out there, they basically had like a polar opposite style. They went from the just scale team to the team that's ahead in the early game every game. So Freddy122 must be doing something good. And then, as I said with the Mad Lions guy, if your team isn't that good at laning, but inexplicably always makes sick mid-game moves that help them win the game or have a chance to win the game, that has to be coaching. Either you've got like the fucking rebirth of like fucking, I don't know, fucking Mithy, Matter, and High all in your team, or your coach is doing a fantastic job in those review sessions, telling you what to do when you get in a bad situation, you know. I think those two have got to be big candidates, so Mac and Freddy122, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I think in LCS, partially it has to be the EG coaching staff, because they made roster changes halfway through the year, which actually activated their style. So I don't know who you give that to, like who is technically, if it's Artemis or if it's I don't know what their exact titles are. Yeah, Peter Dunn might be technically above Artemis. I'm not sure on that one, but I think you have to probably say EG. Everyone else, I'd probably TSM would be in that conversation as well, or Reaper potentially from 100 Thieves, but I think it's pretty clearly EG in my mind.
Oh, by the way, I mean, listen, I was joking earlier, but technically you could even use the argument we've used many times, which is, I personally think the most whack thing about TSM is they don't have a single player who really is the best at their role. Like, Spicker debatably is up there, but like everyone else, the laners aren't like the best in each lane, right? So on that logic, you could use the angle that Bjergsen must have done a pretty decent job. He didn't have the star player at any position, basically like finished first in the league. So yeah, even with all the rest of the context, you have to give the guy props.
It is hard in NA though, because I feel like TSM benefited from the fact that other teams were just self-sabotaging, and like the coaching staffs were sometimes actively hurting the team, or like they changed the coaching staff on C9 between Reignover to Mithy as head coach. So I think there were a lot of problems in that rosters were actively downgraded a lot of times, which made people who did nothing look kind of good in comparison. But I agree. I think Bjergsen does deserve credit for TSM's performance and ending in first place. Let's go on. When are you getting baked together on stream? Well, maybe if we do that content. I'm open to marijuana sponsorships. It's legal in Amsterdam where you are. It's legal in California where I am. So let's go. With Peanut magically pulling a great split from his ass again with Nongshim, do you think he can get to Worlds again this year? I mean, it seems likely that they're going to make Worlds. I don't.
4 teams come out of LCK. Remember, 4 teams.
Yeah.
So.
It does seem pretty likely. Now whether he will do well,
the bigger question would be, would we want him to go to Worlds?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm scared about with this squad, mate. Yeah, I know.
Exactly. Like it's so many, like it's like Peanut, who's a notorious choker with like new players who we don't know if they could perform under pressure. So would I be super psyched? I'd be, I guess, mildly curious how they would do, but
yeah, it'd be novelty, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, sure, might as well. It's not like I really want to see anyone else from the LCK at Worlds this year. I'm not really hyped on LCK.
Indeed.
Okay. I'm going to modify this question, but with EG signing a clothing deal with Wolves, what do you think my chances are at penning a deal between CLG and my local Little League team, which is, of course, Butt Pounder 420 legend?
Basically,
Thorin,
there's a detail. Yeah, okay.
My question to you is this. I don't know anything about Premier League.
Sure.
I have never fucking heard of this team before.
No,
does anyone know who these teams are?
No, but here's the problem. If you know English football, you will know this team. But the problem is exactly that. It's like, this isn't like put it this way. If you go and look at the Premier League, I don't follow football, but I know this. If you go and look at I think the Premier League began in like 1992 or something, right? So if you go and look at at this point in time, it'd be like 20 plus years that it's been around. Put it this way, that was not a team that was in the Premier League most seasons. Like, that was a team that was in the lower and they've just gotten promoted back up, basically. So the problem with it is, that looks like what it probably is, Monty, which is some idiot Americans gone, oh my God, man, we've just partnered with a Premier League team. This is going to open up so many options for us in Europe, and now fan base will grow and and it's like, you fucking idiot middle management guy. Like, you did pick a Premier League team, but you didn't pick like an established one with an enormous fan base that's like really well known. You picked sort of like almost like a gag team, you fucking idiot. That would be like if a sports team, Monty, went like, you won't believe this, just signed a deal with Golden Guardians. You'd be like, you dickhead. Literally any of the LCS team, any of them, even CLG, like Golden Guard, you are aware they're like a laugh. So essentially, yeah, they've basically done that, Money. Like, I don't really know what this deal is. I have no idea why these two, like, it's almost like a Mad Libs that these two names would be connected in my brain at any point in history. Because yeah, it's not some super legendary team or anything, mate.
On the plus side, I now know who they are as a result of this deal, so maybe they're winning. I don't know.
Minor level one, haven't they? I know.
So, if the goal was to make me know what are they? How do you know? Actually, they failed because I don't even know. Are they Wolverhampton? Is that what they're called?
Wolverhampton, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Wolverhampton. So I guess I remembered that now. So I guess I know who they are. So in a way, if their goal was to create knowledge about their brand, I mean, am I ever going to watch one of their soccer games? No. But I suppose I know who they are. I'm not sure what the purpose of it is. Who knows? Who knows? What is the bigger fiction, Astralis' 6 to 7 man lineup or the Bible?
Here's the problem is that no matter what, even if you consider the Bible 100% fiction, it had more true things in it than real things that happened to Astralis. So enough said. There you go. That's how I divide up truth and reality. How you like that?
Also, by listening to the words of the Bible, you might enrich your life, or it might lead to a spiritual awakening. Well, as by listening to Nikolai Nyholm talk about Astralis, you're only being fed lies. So,
yeah, here's the difference. In theory, the Bible was written by God. Nikolai Nyholm is more like the fucking Prince of Darkness, penning all the evil lies that would pervert humanity. But enough about Astralis, yeah. There you go. Lead us all astray, the fallen angels.
Which company would you rather not exist, Riot, Activision, or Nestle? Well, this might affect our sponsorship options in the future, but I think that Riot and Activision at least have certain standards that they have to exist under by operating in a first world country. So I think that even though they have done a lot of bad things, relatively speaking,
sure, objectively, Nestle's got to be the most evil of the three. Yeah. Here's the thing, though. The premise is a good one, and I will say this: this is actually a real serious point you can make, which is this. You'll notice, by the way, a lot of people have got lost on this completely, Monty. Right? How, on the one hand, can I? You'll never ever see me flexing any political shit. I don't ever do it. You don't ever see me putting hashtags for cause. I don't do any of that shit. I don't believe in it personally. But on the other hand, I'll defend LS when I think he's being treated unfairly because he's gay. Or, for example, people want to work with Neom and I've called them out for it. What people aren't understanding about this distinction is this. I don't claim to hold any of those values, but I'll sure as hell hold other people to those fucking values if they fake that they do. That's the point. So, for example, I don't even necessarily know, by the way, that we wouldn't have a sponsor by, like, for example, I think Nestle made like fucking one of the candies when I was a kid that I used to eat. If they offer a sponsorship, I might take it. My problem is this. Listen, we all understand that with how like globalism works, technically all countries and companies are in some level connected, and the money flow does go through everyone. So it's not as simple as like having blood money. Technically that money circulates through everyone eventually. The problem, in my opinion, is this: how much is what you do directly overtly connected on even like a thematic level with what those companies are doing? So you essentially are saying, by working with them, I approve of what they're doing, which unfortunately in the Neon case, you could not avoid that. By working with that company, you were absolutely saying, we think this is fine. The difference is, if Nestle fucks around, that's not really the same as if they just sponsor a candy on the show. Like, it's the candy that's sponsoring the show. You know what I mean? You essentially, if you put enough layers of abstraction in, we're not being ridiculous and saying you have to be a morally pure individual with no flaws, but you have to at least do your due diligence. Like, they have to do that. If they're evil, they have to on their end put some level of abstraction in.
Right, and it's also
in your face, you know.
It's also because of the way that large corporations, as you say, work in terms of globalization. You're almost always one or two steps away from something really shitty happening in some other country on Earth, even if the part of the company that you support or is providing sponsorship for you. Like, so I personally don't have an issue with, as you say, like taking a candy sponsorship from Nestle, because the direct manufacture of those candy bars, I mean, there's obviously some weird stuff sometimes with cocoa farming in third world countries, but it is, you know, like you say, there are certain level of layers of abstraction, and there are certain wings. The companies are so huge that most parts of these companies have nothing to do with the poor practices, right? So it's just, I think it's really hard because of the way globalization works and how large these companies have been allowed to become, that it's challenging to get away from that. Like your example of Neom is like, I still drive a car that takes gas, which I assume sometimes or a lot of the time comes from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, of course.
So it's like, but how do I escape that cycle when electric cars are still relatively new? You know,
here's what I can't resolve, Monty. Like I say, I have a position I think is perfectly reasonable. If you just don't get involved at all, you haven't played a silly game and you do not win the stupid prize. It's up to you whether you personally, privately choose to work with people or not. Here's the problem I have is, even though, as we said, on an objective sense, it's obviously Nestle, I would find it way easier to go, well, listen, there are a million levels of abstraction for what I'm doing. So technically, if someone's going to sponsor me, they could. What I can't believe is this, Monty, is the people who essentially all day long, when there's no danger to their job, would flex about Nestle and certain political things, but then can literally continue working directly for Activision Blizzard and Riot, even with people in offices that they know were credibly accused of horrendous stuff but weren't fired, and they can just continue knowing that their actual work potentially helps that person continue succeeding and then potentially maintain positions of power, which they abuse. That's the one I can't fuck with. It's the whole reason why I actually did go out my way to call out essentially some of the talent for the Neon thing last year, because my feeling was, so you guys are going to flex about this and then turn right back and go and work with the exact people who made that deal. Like, I can't resolve that. I'm sorry. That's also why I don't make people have to do what I do. I'm saying I wouldn't do in that scenario. I would have to leave in that situation if I was someone who'd flex that. But other people, somehow they can resolve that one. I don't know how they do it, but I've always thought that was the weirdest one of all, because as we say, when you work for people like Riot and Blizzard, it interfaces corporation. You know literally the people who make the decisions. You know the guys who hire the people. You know the people who've done exactly the thing. That's why, by the way, as I said on the Four Horsemen, when people leave Riot and Blizzard and they want to do that like come to Jesus moment where they sound just like an ex-alcoholic fucking almost like raving about how, I used to be so bad, I used to drink 3 bottles of Jack. Like, you know, they almost like get off on like the fact that they're so different. When they try to do that, it's like, mate, none of this means anything to me because you left like a year after they did all that shit that you found out. Like, you didn't leave the next day. Like, what the fuck's this story? Like, on some level, you did tacitly sort of endorse what they did by continuing to work with them, you know?
Yeah, that's what I talked about on the Four Horsemen episode about the Activision Blizzard lawsuit, was that when I had my own experience attempting to report sexual harassment and nobody did anything, it was clear that they were bankrupt on values. And so it's really hard for me to trust people in that situation because what is being said externally or the values that are being promoted are not being followed because people are protecting themselves. And so once you realize that people are willing, you know, certain people are willing to do it that, or indeed the entire system is so corrupted that 7 different people did that that I talked to about this issue. You realize that they'll do it for anything, for any reason, and that you see their kind of hierarchy of values at that point in time, which means that they have no loyalty, and who knows what their actions are going to be, because they're only out to save their own skins, and they don't actually hold these values that they espouse they have. So you can't trust them on any circumstance whatsoever. So at that point, it becomes not only an ethical quandary, but honestly, it just becomes a personal, like, self-interest quandary for me, because I can't trust anything that they say from a business perspective or from a personal perspective. So you just have to get the fuck out at that point in time, because every situation is hazardous, both professionally and ethically. And yeah, I mean, I agree. That's really the problem, is like people not standing up for the values that they espouse consistently. And I think it's also, again, with globalization, it's hard to escape scenarios where you aren't ethically compromised at a certain point in time.
Almost a feature of the system. They do it on purpose, so you can't really escape this shit, can you? That's the whole point in it, yeah.
But I do think if you espouse to have, contemporary liberal values about freedom that are in every single Western liberal democracy, it is very difficult to justify ethically working for a company that is effectively wholly owned by the Chinese government. To me, that's
of course.
Some companies are like minority owned, so you can kind of like ethically get away with it. But if you're working at Riot and you are 100% owned by Tencent, and let's not be confused, Tencent basically is the Chinese government.
I mean, any big company, you sort of have to be on some level. That's all where it goes, isn't it?
You are kind of complicit at that point in time, because your interests are 100% aligned with the Chinese government's. So that's a bit questionable too.
Basically, my problem is this. I don't like the person who, when it actually finally could cost them something, turns around and sort of goes, but I just want to work at BlizzCon. Can't I just work games? It's like, you always could have, dickhead. You're the one who wanted to LARP as a fucking literal civil rights activist. And then when you finally had a moment it could have cost you, went, but I just want to keep doing video games. It's like, well, you're a joke, mate. So basically, just keep your fucking nose clean and there's no problem for anyone.
Yeah, just work at the video game company, because that's actually what your hierarchy of values is. There's no problem with that, guys. If your hierarchy of value is, I want to work at this awesome video game company and make video games, then just do that. But don't pretend to have politics as your highest level, because otherwise you should probably, I mean, just objectively, you would be happier in politics. Yeah. That's where you should be. Like, why are you in video games? It doesn't make sense. So, I don't know. Shit's crazy to me. But anyway, that's enough of rant. It's tough. And, Thorin and I have had conversations in the past to be transparent about, like, would we accept military sponsorships for Flashpoint? For me, the answer was yes, because I see a lot more positives than that. And it's a government institution that is, socially acceptable in America and offers people the opportunity to go to college or to see the world in many cases where they wouldn't get that otherwise. And so for me, the good outweighs the bad in that specific circumstance. So
also, again, that's a good example, by the way, because on the surface, people think it's the same thing, but it isn't. Like, for example, if you are sponsored by the US military, it's not like you're literally on, and we're being sponsored by Desert Storm this week. We're not literally part of, like, the campaigns you don't agree with. Yeah. We're just essentially sponsored by the company who essentially are, on the most base level, the defense of the country as well. Yes. Now, listen, you can certainly argue they're not used that way, but the point is there's enough abstraction, again, you can sort of like vibe with that mentally, assuming you're not just going to go off the grid and leave all society right now. This is why, in general, in life, the one thing I'd say to take away from this is, it's all well and good having affectations and ideas of who you think you are, but you don't ever actually know in life who you are until it is tested. Until you've had a moment where you have to prove that you are what you think you are, you'll be surprised. A lot of things, like I've done this myself, like certain scenarios where you go, shit, maybe I don't really think that, actually, now that I'm forced to make a choice. But if you never have to, if it's all just in your mind, anyone can think they're anything, can't they? It's why, if you notice pro players, the amount of cocky pro players who think they're this shit when they're like 70% of the best players mental, because they never had it actually tested. It's not until they're really in that server opposite the guy and they go, fuck, this is way harder than I thought,
Very different to be in that situation. That's why, guys, we said it on Four Horsemen. Look at people's actions and deeds and not what they put on Twitter about their own alleged values. Do not trust people for the most part when they make grandiose statements about themselves. All you have to do is say, When were the times in which you actually put yourself on the line? You had skin in the game for these values. That's what matters, not just saying the nice words that everybody thinks you should say. So I feel like the world is slowly waking up to this fact, which is a relief in many ways. But we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. All right, guys, that's the last question. We'll be back next week, probably taking a look at the first round of the LCS and LEC playoffs. Subsequent weeks, once we actually get into LPL and LCK playoffs, we'll have those conversations as well. So we'll be here throughout Summer Split and Worlds. Should be no more interruptions, and we'll see you then.